Chapter 636. On the first day of class, Qin Lian discovered a serious problem. She couldn't understand Rinpoche's lecture at all. At first, when Rinpoche said that today's topic was electricity, she was full of anticipation and even a little surprised. No matter when, lightning was the most powerful force that was most difficult for humans to control. More importantly, the name of her sword was Thunderclap. It wasn't that the sword was as fast as lightning, but that this sword was really related to lightning. Therefore, when Qin Lian heard that Rinpoche was going to teach her about electricity, she was pleasantly surprised. She didn't expect to hear such an important thing on the first day. Then, her expectant gaze gradually froze. She couldn't understand what they were talking about electrons, atoms, molecules, and electric charges at all. Rinpoche also gave everyone silk and glass rods for the experiment. She didn't understand it all and could only watch the students from the back. Or rather, her pride didn't allow her to do things that looked childish like those kids. She was still very curious about what Rinpoche was talking about. What made her depressed was that Rinpoche gave her a book, but she couldn't understand it at all. This made her a little mad. The words in the book were like a heavenly book. She spent a lot of effort to decipher a few words, and she didn't know if those words had the same meaning as the words of Great Xia. During the second lesson, her attention shifted to the four-legged man who appeared in the classroom. This was because she had seen this man outside. He had 2 legs and was very powerful. However, the man in the classroom didn't have any vitality and was like a corpse. Although he could move and speak, his voice always sounded stiff and extremely weird. It was as if he was prepared to say something. Aren't they the same person? Qin Lian quickly realized this problem. No matter how she thought about it, they weren't the same person. After school, she couldn't help but look for Rinpoche and said, "Principal Ren, I don't understand these words." Qin Lian was very reluctant to say this because it made her feel like she was illiterate. However, this was the truth. "Oh, you should study with the new students. They will teach you how to read." Rinpoche smiled. Qin Lian's expression suddenly changed. The new students were all older children. Not to mention whether she was willing to learn from them, how long would she have to stay in Lon City? "Is there any other way?" "This is for you." Rinpoche took out a stack of paper from the table. On the paper were the words and simplified Chinese characters of this world that he had marked before. It was equivalent to a dictionary. "Remember to return it to me when you're done." "Thank you." Qin Lian was delighted when she saw the content on the topmost piece of paper. With this, it would be much more convenient. "You can ask if you don't know," Rinpoche replied. Qin Lian nodded. The problem now was that she didn't know anything. It seemed like she could only go back and figure out the words first. After bidding farewell to Rinpoche, Qin Lian left the academy. As she walked past the imperial city, she took a deep look in its direction. The 5th most powerful expert in the world, Qi Zixiao, was inside. She wondered what kind of woman she was. Wrong, she was the 4th most powerful expert in the world. However, not many people knew about Ting Yu's death. Most people still thought that she was the 5th most powerful expert in the world. As a result, Li Yuanzhu and Qi Zixiao were ranked 3rd and 4th in the world. The 2 of them were about the same age. Li Yuanzhu was a few years older, but she could already be considered a heaven's pride. In terms of strength, Qi Zixiao should be weaker than Li Yuanzhu. However, in a few more years, Qi Zixiao would probably not be weaker than the current Li Yuanzhu. Rinpoche was really envious of their talents. As a sword master, she didn't have the opportunity to cultivate, and her lifespan was much shorter than theirs. She would probably age like those ordinary people after 10 or 20 years, while they would still be able to maintain their current appearance. At the thought of this, Qin Lian felt a little regretful and sad. When she was young, she also had the dream of becoming an expert in the world. Although her current strength wasn't considered weak, she was unfortunately a sword master. Just as she was feeling emotional, she suddenly heard an ear-piercing sound coming from the side. The thunder behind her also trembled as if it was warning her. Qin Lian dodged it, and a stone smashed into the flagstone beside her, smashing it into pieces. A little girl who was about 10 years old, dressed in a white silk robe, stood on top of the wall and looked at her with a fierce expression. Hey, great Xia citizen! Tong Lan shouted from the top of the wall. Her voice was as clear as a silver bell. Didn't your parents teach you to be polite? Qing Lian said unhappily. Grandfather has always told me to kill anyone from Great Xia first. Only dead Great Xia people are good people. Tong Lan leaped down from the wall and walked to Qing Lian in a few steps. Draw a circle. Tong Lan leaned forward, and the tip of her nose was almost in front of Qing Lian's chest. When she saw the mountain range on Qing Lian's chest, Tong Lan felt even more disgusted with this woman. Ah! Draw a circle. If you win, I won't find trouble with you in the future. If you lose, don't let me see you again. Tong Lan stared at the mountain range in front of her and said word by word. You are cross-eyed. Qing Lian suddenly said. Tong Lan's face turned bright red, and she retreated a few meters away in a flash. Don't say such useless things. If you lose, don't ever appear in front of me again. Tong Lan put her hands on her waist and stared at Qing Lian with a red face. You were really cross-eyed just now. Also, I said before that we are not enemies. Qing Lian said. In any case, only dead Great Xia people are good people. Next is Great Xia people who are out of sight. Tong Lan raised her small face slightly. What exactly do you want? I said before that we will draw a circle and have a competition. Whoever is knocked out of the circle first will lose. Qing Lian looked at the tiny child in front of her and felt somewhat helpless. These aboriginals all had a bad temper. She wasn't afraid of the other party. No matter how she looked, the other party was only about 10 years old. Furthermore, she could feel that the other party was weaker than her. However, why did she have to fight with the other party? One had to know that every time a sword master uses a spirit sword, he consumes his lifespan. If I don't agree, I'm afraid that the other party will always find trouble with me in the future. That would be a headache for me. This bet isn't very fair to me. The price I have to pay is much higher. Qing Lian said. This is Dayo, not Great Xia. What kind of fairness do you want? However, I won't bully you. Say it. Tong Lan put her hands on her waist and told the other party whose territory this was. Following which, her tone changed. If I lose, I won't appear in front of you again. If you lose, you have to respectfully address me as sister whenever you see me. If anyone finds trouble with me, you have to be responsible for settling them. Do you think I'm a fool? If you return to Great Xia, do you think I have to go there to protect you? Tong Lan said with disdain. Only in Lan City. Or I can narrow it down to only the academy. As long as someone from the academy finds trouble with me, you have to be responsible for settling them, Qing Lian said. Even though she had only stayed at the academy for a day, she could tell that this girl was different from the others. Not only was she the youngest, but many people seemed to be afraid of her. In this way, as long as I win against this little girl, I won't have to worry about anyone finding trouble with me anymore. This will also prevent similar incidents from happening in the future. Shurgan, do you think Tong Lan can win? A few young men and women squatted in the corner and watched the scene on the street. Tong Lan was using the tip of her foot to draw a big circle on the ground. There were only a few people watching from a distance. Fortunately, this was in Beihong district, which was close to the palace. If there was such a popular entertainment in a crowded place, there would probably be a group of people holding nuts and shaved ice waiting there. I don't know. Logically speaking, given little Tong Lan's strength, there aren't many people in Great Xia who can defeat her. I don't feel any danger from this woman, but I feel that her aura is a little strange. One of the young men was Shurgan. Shurgan, with a few of us squatting here, will anyone find trouble with us? One of the young men said with a cheeky smile. The few of them were squatting on the top of the wall of the Shur family's residence. They hadn't forgotten the situation after they broke through the Shur family's wall. You can choose to go down there. I'm sure no one will find trouble with you. Shurgan rolled his eyes. The view here is better. That young man looked around and felt that this was the best place to go. Should we inform Yagüe? Someone else asked. By the time Yagüe arrives, the fight will be over. Besides, he's just a person from Great Xia. Someone immediately said with disdain. Forget it, let's stay here and watch. The person who spoke gave up the idea after some thought. Chapter 637. Whoever steps out of the circle first will lose. Let's stick to what we just said. If you lose, don't ever appear in front of me again. Tong Lan drew a circle on the ground with the tip of her foot, leaving a palm-thick mark on the slate. Then she walked to the center of the circle and looked up at Qing Lian. Do you think you will win? If you lose, you have to respectfully call me sister when you see me. Qing Lian smiled as she looked at the tiny child in front of her. In Great Xia, reaching the man-wheel level at this age was considered pretty good. Attaining the earth wheel level at the age of 20 was considered a rare genius. However, this girl in front of her was only about 10 years old, yet she had the strength of an intermediate earth wheel expert. Her talent was indeed terrifying. What was more terrifying was that she wasn't the only girl with such strength. There were a few older earth wheel experts around, such as the 15 or 16-year-old youngster in the class and the 15 or 16-year-old boy and girl standing not far away. The Aboriginals were really a terrifying race. Even though Qing Lian had absolute confidence in her strength and could escape from those cardinal heaven experts, she was still shocked by the cultivation potential of the Aboriginals. The three nations had been using technology to block the Aboriginals. The Aboriginals were so poor, and they lacked food and weapons. However, they were able to defeat Great Xia and the Yun Nation and the Qin Nation with their 100,000 soldiers last year. If the Aboriginals didn't lack food and weapons and had hundreds of thousands of soldiers, they would be really terrifying. At this moment, she doubted whether Su Qing's decision was right or wrong. However, she quickly laughed at herself. She wasn't a saint, so what did this have to do with her? All she had to do was complete the deal with Su Qing and help him fulfill his wish. Then he would use the power of the entire nation to fulfill her request. As for other matters, what did it have to do with her? She was just a little girl. Hey, can you hurry up? Tong Lan raised her eyebrows and shouted after seeing that Qing Lian didn't move for a long time. Qing Lian smiled, took a few steps forward, and walked into the circle. She drew her sword from her back and pointed it diagonally at the ground in front of her. Make your move. Without saying a word, Tong Lan stomped on the flagstone and shot toward Qing Lian like a cannonball. While she was in the air, she punched Qing Lian 13 times in a row. Every punch was aimed at Qing Lian's chest, as if she had a grudge against it. With the speed of her punches and the sound of the air being torn apart, no one doubted that as long as they landed a punch, they would be able to pierce through the person in front of them. Naughty girl! When Qing Lian saw Tong Lan's actions, the corners of her eyes twitched a few times. A sword screen appeared in front of her and blocked the 13 punches. Such great strength! The two of them had just exchanged blows when Qing Lian's eyes twitched again. This little girl's strength was much greater than she had imagined. Clang, clang, clang. Their fists and swords clashed 13 times. Qing Lian took 3 steps back and barely stopped in the circle. Get out! Tong Lan leaped up ferociously and kicked Qing Lian consecutively. However, at the same time, Qing Lian also leaped up and jumped even higher than Tong Lan. In the air, Qing Lian stretched her limbs and flipped over Tong Lan's head. At the same time, a dazzling white sword light slashed toward Tong Lan like a thunderbolt. Oh no! The surrounding people immediately exclaimed. They didn't expect that a winner would be decided in just a split second. However, at this moment, Tong Lan twisted a few times in the air and waved her right palm several times. All of the palm strikes landed on the body of the sword and forcefully pushed the sword force to the side. What a powerful little girl. It seems like I have to use more skills. Qing Lian was a little surprised. She originally thought that such a young girl didn't have much combat experience and that the sword attack just now would have caught her off guard. She didn't expect the other party to react so quickly. Your Majesty? Tong Lan's expression changed the moment she landed and looked behind Qing Lian. Tong Lan's voice gave everyone a shock. Why would Her Majesty appear here? They immediately turned their heads to look. Qing Lian's heart skipped a beat. She wanted to turn her head back, but she forcibly stopped herself from twisting her neck. From the corner of her eye, she saw the little girl rushing toward her. This little girl is evil, Qing Lian thought to herself. I almost fell for it. Tong Lan's petite body got close to Qing Lian's body and directly used her shoulder to knock Qing Lian. She used one hand to block Qing Lian's backhand sword and followed up with a kick to the groin. She forced Qing Lian to retreat and continued to attack while saying, "Why must you come to the school? Can't you just leave? You won't understand even if you come. They say that big breasts have no brains. Since your breasts are so big, your brain must be full of gravy. Don't tell me you have taken a fancy to that gigolo? That won't do. Her Majesty will beat you to death. Even if she doesn't beat you to death, she will still skin you alive." Tong Lan suddenly had a look of realization and said seriously, "This little girl deserves to be slapped." The more Qing Lian listened to Tong Lan's words, the angrier she got. This little girl looked pretty good, but her words and actions were really infuriating. She used underhanded tricks one after another and kept muttering trash talk, which was very annoying. Who did Tong Lan learn this from? Shirgan and the rest were a little confused when they saw this scene. They didn't know Tong Lan was like this in the past. She actually had so many underhanded tricks and so much trash talk. It definitely wasn't taught by Minister Tong. Shirgan said with certainty. Although Minister Tong also liked to bicker with Minister Qin, both of them would fight after a few words, unlike Tong Lan who could fight and talk at the same time. "Do you guys think she looks a little like someone?" Another student said thoughtfully. "She looks a little like Yagüe." The person beside him immediately reacted. "I heard that Tong Lan often goes to the palace to train with Yagüe." Everyone discussed for a while and immediately knew where Tong Lan learned this from. Indeed, Yagüe was the only one with this style. "Where did you buy this pair of shoes?" "I saw my grandfather bring one back the other day. He said it was a gift from a lady in a brothel." "Were you in a brothel too? What were you doing there? Did you see my grandpa there?" Qing Lian was going crazy. Why was this little girl so bad? Her stomach was full of dirty tricks, and there wasn't a single dirty word coming out of her mouth. She might as well use dirty words. Originally, she didn't want to attract attention, so it was better to deal with her with all her might. 9 heavens! Qing Lian forced Tong Lan to retreat with a series of strikes. Then, she pointed her sword to the sky, and it seemed as though something was gathering and twining around the sword. Shirgan's facial expression changed immediately. "This is bad." Tong Lan's facial expression also changed. She kicked her feet repeatedly, and 2 shoes came out of her feet and flew towards Qing Lian's face. Chapter 638. At this moment, the sword in Qing Lian's hand shone with a greenish-blue radiance, as if there were electric arcs twining around it. Calamity! Qing Lian didn't listen to Tong Lan's trash talk and slashed out with her sword. Before the sword landed, everyone around felt a gust of wind. The girl in the field wasn't holding a sword, but an electric dragon that was baring its fangs and brandishing its claws. Tong Lan gritted her teeth and took out a small dagger from her waist. The blade of the dagger was only the size of her palm, and it was covered with veined patterns that looked like blood vessels. She held the dagger upside down in front of her. Boom! Qing Lian's sword slashed down like a gas explosion. All the flagstones in the field exploded, and Tong Lan was blown away. She flew 70 to 80 meters before crashing heavily on the ground. Tong Lan. A few students immediately dashed toward Tong Lan. A few silhouettes landed around Qing Lian in an instant. 4 young men and women surrounded Qing Lian from 4 corners. "Coming to Lan City to flaunt your prowess? Do you think Dayo is weak? 6th uncle, bring me my rod." Shirgan sneered, turned his head, and shouted toward the courtyard. Then he turned to the other 3 and said, "Are you all new students this year? I can handle this. So powerful, but I also want to try out the experts from Great Xia." A young girl smiled and pulled out a dagger from her waist. "It's too embarrassing to fight 4 against 1. You guys fight, I will go and take a look." The other 2 looked at each other, took the initiative to retreat, and headed straight for Tong Lan. Then, an iron rod as thick as a wrist flew out of the courtyard with a whistling sound and stuck diagonally into the ground. "Thank you, 6th uncle." Shirgan stepped forward and pulled out the rod with a smile. "If you lose, don't call me uncle." A row of heads appeared on the wall of the courtyard, and 5 or 6 people were leaning on the wall and looking out. "Come on. You are the worst in the Sure family." One of the burly men laughed loudly, causing another round of laughter. Shergan's face immediately turned black. After that strike, there were a lot more people on the street. About 40 to 50 people jumped out from various courtyards and surrounded them. Qin Lian felt the aura around her and was secretly shocked. The weakest of these people was actually at the Earth Will level, and there were even 3 Spirit Will experts. Who was that movement just now? Interesting. A heroic voice came from afar. When the last word fell, the person was already in front of them. Everyone turned around and saw that it was Tong Zhenye. Interesting. It's this sword, right? Tong Zhenye rubbed his chin as he stared at the sword in Qin Lian's hand. The power of the sword just now wasn't enough for him to specially come over to watch, but there was one thing that interested him. It gave off the feeling that it was like a bolt of lightning in the sky. "Are you the great Xia man who has been staying at the lady boss's place for the past 2 days?" Tong Zhenye recognized Qin Lian's identity. The lady boss was naturally referring to Ning Kaichen. Recently, his range of activities had shifted from House Yunyan to the Gue family tavern. "However, you guys are quite bold to actually fight in front of the Imperial Palace." Tong Zhenye looked at Qin Lian, then looked at Shergan, who was holding a rod, and the young girl who was holding a short knife. "It wasn't you two? Who is it?" Tong Zhenye immediately discovered that there were no signs of a fight between the two of them. He then looked at the people around him and had a bad premonition. "Grandpa!" In the distance, Tong Lan looked gloomy after being helped up. She didn't expect this guy to be so powerful, and she didn't feel it at all. Qin Lian's heart skipped a beat. This was like hitting the young and the old came. This was going to be troublesome. Little Lan Lan? Tong Zhenye saw that there were bloodstains on the corner of Tong Lan's mouth and lapel, and that there were many wounds on her body. He immediately flew into a rage. He had no hair, and his beard was all standing up. A pair of eyes that were as sharp as steel knives swept across Qin Lian, causing her to subconsciously hold her sword in front of her chest. The surrounding students were also forced to retreat step by step due to his imposing manner. Even Shergan and the young girl couldn't stand still and retreated to the corner of the wall. However, Shergan's vision immediately turned black as if a wall had appeared in front of him. 6 burly men stood in front of him and watched the scene with folded arms. "You came to Lan City to beat up my granddaughter, he. Tong Zhenye sneered. "Do you think I should hang you on the wall to dry, or hang you on the wall after drying?" Qin Lian frowned, glanced around, and thought to herself, "Why isn't Rinpochen here yet? I'm afraid that only Rinpochen will be able to explain himself today. Sir Tong, Her Majesty wants all of you to have an audience with her." At this moment, a woman in full armor appeared in the middle of the scene. "I can wait for me to hang this little girl on the wall before following you to see Her Majesty," Tong Zhenye said. "Her Majesty wants all of you to have an audience with her." Xinge repeated. "Grandpa, I was the one who asked her to draw the circle. It has nothing to do with you," Tong Lan said as she was supported by someone. "You are my granddaughter." Tong Zhenye glared at her. "Why are you getting involved in the affairs of women?" Tong Lan said disdainfully. Tong Zhenye was speechless. "Forget it, let's go and see Her Majesty." Tong Zhenye withdrew his surging imposing manner. Seeing this, Qin Lian heaved a sigh of relief, but immediately became nervous again. She didn't expect to see Qi Zixiao under such circumstances. She heard that Qi Zixiao was a rather unreasonable person, and she didn't know how she would be treated. Of the 36 stratagems, the safest would be to escape. Although there were many experts around, he could still escape if he wanted to. "Sheathe your sword and follow me to the palace to see Her Majesty." Xinge walked to Qin Lian and said coldly, "All right." Qin Lian clenched her teeth and sheathed her sword. After thinking about it, she still felt that the things that Rinpochen talked about were rare and couldn't just leave like that. As long as Rinpochen was there, she would be fine, right? Not to mention, Su Qing and Rinpochen were still cooperating. At this moment, she felt that Su Qing's cooperation with Rinpochen was the right choice. But she forgot that she wouldn't be here if it wasn't for Su Qing. A moment later, she, Tong Lan, Tong Jingye, and the others were brought into a large hall. Wait, Her Majesty will see you in a while. Exenja disappeared after saying this. Tong Jingye touched his chin and asked, I don't seem to have anything to do today. Why am I here? Even Her Majesty can't stand seeing you get involved in the affairs of women. Tong Lan said. Shurgan and the others grinned and had to hold back their laughter. Tong Jingye's face immediately turned black as he glared at Tong Lan. Your Majesty, they are waiting in Hanyuan Palace Hall. Exenja appeared in the Empress's bedroom and cupped her fists. Oh, let them wait a little longer. The Empress concentrated on playing Candy Crush and said, Wait for Renbaqian to come back first. Your Majesty, move this over. Hong Luan whispered from behind the Empress. I know. The Empress quickly moved the mouse. After a while, Renbaqian arrived at the bedroom. Hong Luan and Qing Yuan made way for him when they saw him approaching. Renbaqian sniffed the Empress's hair before saying, Your Majesty, you bathed in purple orchids today. It was yesterday. The Empress snorted. To me, Your Majesty is always in the present. Renbaqian whispered into her ear. Move further away, it tickles. The Empress shrank her neck and hit him on the head with the back of her hand, causing a bump to swell up. However, what you said just now was rather interesting. The Empress put down the mouse and muttered, Everyone is always in the present. Then, she seemed to have thought of something and fell into deep thought. Your Majesty? Renbaqian called out softly. Sir Ren, don't disturb Her Majesty. She might be enlightened about something. Hong Luan gently patted Renbaqian. Enlightened about what? Renbaqian was puzzled. Look at Her Majesty's fingers and eyes. Her Majesty often experiences this kind of situation where she suddenly becomes enlightened about something. If she succeeds, her strength will increase, so we can't disturb her, Hong Luan said. Renbaqian walked to the front of the Empress and found her making a strange gesture with her fingers. Her eyes were narrowed into slits, and there seemed to be a red glow flowing through them. Renbaqian opened his mouth. Was this the legendary epiphany? Did the Empress often experience this kind of situation? Chapter 639. How long will it take for Her Majesty to wake up? Renbaqian circled around the Empress twice and saw that her face was different from the past. She was not as spirited as she used to be, and her eyes were slightly squinted. Renbaqian always felt like reaching out to pinch her. The Empress didn't respond to the outside world at the moment, and this opportunity couldn't be missed. However, his desire to live overcame everything, and he gave up on the idea of being hung on a flagpole to dry in the wind. I don't know. Sometimes 2 to 4 hours, sometimes 8 to 10 hours, and at most 3 days, Hong Luan said. They weren't afraid to tell Renbaqian about this. Will Her Majesty wake up if she encounters danger during this period? Renbaqian suddenly thought of something. Of course, the two of them said matter-of-factly. Oh. Renbaqian stood in front of the Empress and looked at her quietly. He still felt that it was fun to pinch her like this. Did Her Majesty summon Minister Tong and a few students to the palace? Renbaqian asked after admiring the Empress for a while. He knew about this before he came back, but he didn't expect the Empress to suddenly enter a state of enlightenment. Yes, but we have to wait for Her Majesty to wake up, Qing Yuan said. I'll go and take a look. Renbaqian got up and left the hall. After asking the palace guards, he found Exenja and found out which hall those people were in. After asking, Renbaqian wasn't in a hurry to leave. He stood 5 meters away from Exenja, stretched out 2 fingers and asked, How many are these? Exenja looked at Renbaqian expressionlessly, turned around, and walked away. Don't worry, let's take a look at your condition first. Maybe your eyes have a solution, Renbaqian said. Upon hearing Renbaqian's words, Exenja immediately stopped, turned around, and asked, What solution? We have to see what's the condition of your eyes. Is it congenital amblyopia, astigmatism, or glaucoma? Renbaqian said, Her Majesty told me before, but we need to know what's the condition of your eyes. Exenja said expressionlessly, I don't know either. Next time, I'll bring a vision test for you and see what's the condition of your eyes, Rinpoche said. Thank you. Xinjia remained expressionless. She nodded at Rinpoche and left as if she didn't want to say another word. Even though Rinpoche rarely interacted with Xinjia, he could often see her since she was the commander of the imperial bodyguards. It was just that there were very few opportunities for them to talk. In all fairness, Xinjia's looks were above average. Furthermore, she wasn't as heroic as the Empress. If one only looked at her face, she looked more delicate. However, her expression was even colder than the Empress's. Rinpoche had heard from Qing Yuan that Xinjia wasn't originally this cold, but after she became the commander of the Empress's imperial bodyguards, she gradually became like this. Rinpoche guessed that, on one hand, it was because this would help him establish his prestige and command that bunch of burly imperial bodyguards. On the other hand, it was because he had learned from the Empress. After putting on a cold face for a long time, he naturally became like this. After all, the Empress was the idol of many people in Daeyo. It was normal for a lady like Xinjia to imitate the Empress's expressions. Rinpoche arrived at Hanyuan Palace Hall while pondering about Xinjia's eyes. He saw Tong Jinye casually pacing back and forth in the hall. Tong Lan, who was still covered in blood, was standing there with her eyes closed. Everyone else was obediently standing in one place and not moving an inch. Principal Ren, where's Her Majesty? Tong Jinye heard footsteps and turned his head to see that only Rinpoche had entered. He stretched his neck to look behind him and was puzzled when he realized that the Empress wasn't there. Her Majesty seems to have comprehended something and won't be able to see you for the time being, Rinpoche replied. He took a closer look at Qing Lian and Tong Lan. Indeed, it was as he had heard before, Tong Lan was the one who suffered a loss. Then, I'll just keep waiting here? Tong Jinye asked with his eyes wide open. Sir Tong, you can go back first. Rinpoche thought for a while. Tong Jinye's status couldn't be compared to others, and the Ministry of Works had other things to do. It wasn't appropriate to keep him waiting here. It would be fine if it was only for a short period of time, but no one knew when the Empress would wake up from her comprehension. If Tong Jinye left first, the Empress probably wouldn't blame him. In that case, if Her Majesty asks about it, remember to help me say a word. Tong Jinye grinned. Sir Tong, you may leave, Rinpoche replied. Upon seeing this, Tong Jinye didn't stay any longer. After taking a deep look at Qing Lian, he strode out of Hanyuan Palace Hall. The remaining people were the students of the academy. Qing Lian, Tong Lan, Shurgan, and a young girl were this year's new students. Rinpoche remembered that her name was Zhu Hua. Don't you guys have anything to do? Fighting after school? It seems like there's too little homework. Rinpoche sneered as he paced a few steps in front of them. It has nothing to do with me. I was forced to accept the challenge. I can't possibly not retaliate when someone punches me in the face, right? Qing Lian snorted. She's from Great Xia. Tong Lan mumbled and glared at Qing Lian. Qing Lian swept a glance at her and said, I can listen in with the principal's permission. Furthermore, you lost just now. In the future, when you see me, you have to respectfully address me as sister. Call me sister first. Tong Lan opened her mouth and wanted to retort, but no matter what, it was a fact that she had lost. If he were to abide by the terms of the bet, he would have to address this damned Great Xia person as sister every time he saw her in the future. That would be worse than killing her. But if she didn't abide by the bet, she wouldn't be able to get over it. A dirty move was a dirty move. She understood that if she was willing to bet, she had to be willing to lose. In any case, no matter which choice she made, it would be very uncomfortable. The more she thought about it, the more depressed she became. Finally, she screamed, tilted her head, and slammed it into Shurgan. Why did you bump into me? Shurgan said grumpily as he dodged to the side. My head is itchy. Tong Lan was going crazy. Looking at Tong Lan's expression, Rinpoche couldn't be bothered to reprimand her. It would be good to let her learn a lesson so that she wouldn't have to use her fists to do the talking every day. What about you two? What happened? Rinpoche looked at Shurgan and Zhu Hua again. Shurgan immediately complained, I didn't do anything. Wasn't Tong Lan injured? I was afraid that she would take the opportunity to attack, so I stopped her. Tong Lan went crazy when she heard that Shirgan had injured her. Don't you know that you shouldn't expose others' shortcomings? I even stood up for you. Don't be ungrateful. Shirgan rolled his eyes at her and said to Rinpoche, Teacher, you said that students should help each other. I didn't do anything wrong, did I? Don't play petty tricks. Rinpoche glared at him. When he arrived, he heard what happened from the others, and it was obvious that Shirgan wasn't telling the truth. What about you? He looked at Zhu Hua again. Zhu Hua glanced at both sides and looked away. You got into a fight after just a few days in school? You are also a talent. I didn't fight. Zhu Hua immediately said. You didn't fight, but you used a knife, right? Rinpoche sneered. This group of students was really talented. They brought knives, daggers, and swords to school. He wondered if they would bring mace in the future. I only took out a knife and didn't fight, Zhu Hua argued. According to the law, fighting in private in Lan City without reporting to the Public Order Bureau will be punished with 3 lashes. Furthermore, this matter was brought to the attention of Her Majesty. Your crime will be increased by 10 times, and each of you will be punished with 30 lashes. Now that Her Majesty is busy and can't take care of you, I will give you a chance to copy the 3-character classic 100 times each. You can go home when you finish. Starting tomorrow, you will have to clean the toilets for a week. Rinpoche said. When they heard this, their faces immediately turned bitter. Whether it was copying the 3-character classic 100 times or cleaning the toilets, it was like torture to them, and it wasn't much better than being whipped. Furthermore, it had always been one more crime. How could there be 10 more crimes? I don't accept this. Qin Lian's eyes widened. She, a great expert, actually had to copy books and clean toilets in Lan City? This couldn't be tolerated. If you want to listen in, you have to abide by the rules here, Rinpoche said coldly. This matter has already been brought to the attention of Her Majesty. Do you think you can escape? Teacher, I'm hungry. Shirgan licked his face. Since you are so energetic, it's fine to starve for a few meals. Rinpoche left everyone in the hall and went out to get someone to bring him pen and paper. Chapter 640. Oh, you wrote quite fast. Rinpoche took the stack of papers from Shirgan. Shirgan knew very well that he was living under another person's roof, so he immediately replied, It's all thanks to teacher's good guidance. If your father wasn't the great elder, I would have suspected that you were wearing the skin of the aboriginals. Rinpoche sighed. Shi Qing and Shirgan were different from the aboriginals. Go back. The next time you are caught, it won't be so simple. You will have to go to Jingyang Street and shout, I'm really my father, for the whole afternoon. Shirgan's face turned black when he heard this. Yague's mouth was too harsh. Needless to say, he would have to shout for the whole afternoon. Just one sentence would make him lose face. Rinpoche moved a chair to sit in front of Hanyuan Hall, crossed his legs, and waved his hand to chase Shirgan away. He turned to look at the room and reckoned that Tong Lan was almost done. Shirgan's group of students had been punished more than once and had learned from it. As for the other 2, they were scratching their ears and cheeks like 2 female monkeys. They probably wouldn't be able to leave Hanyuan Hall tonight. After a while, Tong Lan put down her pen, snorted, and glanced at Qin Lian. Realizing that Qin Lian was ignoring her, Tong Lan resentfully got up and walked to Zhu Hua's side. Hey, what's your name? Zhu Hua. Zhu Hua, who was scratching her hair, looked up with sorrow in her eyes. If she had known earlier, she would have joined the army. When you get out, I will invite you to my house. Tong Lan said. If you can help me write this, I don't mind not going to your house. Zhu Hua immediately muttered. When Tong Lan heard this, she immediately shook her head like a rattle drum and floated out of Hanyuan Palace Hall. If you are caught again, in addition to copying, you will have to go to Jingyang Street and shout, My father is really my grandfather, for the whole afternoon, Rinpoche said maliciously. At the same time, he took the punishment paper from Tong Lan's hands and scanned it. My grandfather will fight you to the death. Tong Lan said impolitely. Her Majesty will fight your grandfather to the death. Renbachien sneered. My background is much stronger than yours. Tong Lan was immediately speechless. Her little face immediately darkened, and the joy she felt from writing the punishment disappeared without a trace. By the way, do you really know what a brothel does? Renbachien asked. Isn't it just eating, drinking, and playing? Tong Lan said disdainfully, My mother said that all the women inside are bad. If my father goes there again, she will break his legs. If your father finds out that you sold him out just like that, he will break your legs. Renbachien said before waving his hand to chase Tong Lan home. Once Tong Lan left the palace, she looked up and shouted 3 times, Ugh. Then, he heard his stomach rumble like thunder, and ran home without looking back. After Tong Lan left, Renbachien walked around the hall to check on their progress. Qin Lian wrote the least. She only wrote 5 pages, but one of them was written in the language of this world according to the dictionary he gave her. She was a smart person. Although he had suffered a little, he had learned a lot of words this time. He looked at Zhuohua again and saw that her handwriting was similar to Qin Lian's. Her handwriting was crooked like a chicken claw. Renbachien shook his head and sighed. You are a pretty girl, but why are your handwriting so ugly? Zhuohua threw her pen on the table and lamented, I have never learned how to write before. Why don't you give me 30 lashes instead? You have to practice because you haven't learned. In the future, you won't even be able to read the newspaper. What else can you do? Renbachien said. I'm going crazy. Zhuohua hugged her head and pulled her hair. Keep it up. You are the worst. Renbachien encouraged her. Principal, are you encouraging me? Zhuohua looked up at Renbachien with her eyes wide open. Of course, but encouragement should also be based on objective reality. Renbachien laughed. Keep it up. I hope to see you at the academy tomorrow. Can you let me go to the toilet? Zhuohua turned around and asked pitifully. Go. The guards outside will take you there. Renbachien waved his hand. After Zhuohua left, Qin Lian looked up and said, The Aboriginals are so xenophobic. I really don't know how you survive here. Renbachien touched his chin and asked, I'm all right. Qin Lian snorted. She sighed for nothing. Of course, no one would do anything to this gigolo. Who is this Mencius's mother? Who is Dou Yansheng? Who wrote the Analects of Confucius? Where is the book written by Mencius? Also, Xia has Yu, Shang has Tang. Zhou Wenwu is known as the 3 Kings. What does that mean? Qin Lian opened her mouth and asked a lot of questions. If you want to know, follow the new students to class in the future. I can't explain it clearly here, Renbachien said. He then waved his hand and left Hanyuan Palace Hall for the Empress's bedroom. On the other hand, the bedroom was brightly lit. The fan was turned on and there was an ice basin. However, the Empress was still sitting on the bed in the same position as before and hadn't woken up. Renbachien sat beside the Empress and looked at her, who was exceptionally quiet under the light. He sat there for 2 hours before returning to Pingle Park to rest. Renbachien originally thought that the Empress would wake up soon, but she didn't wake up for 3 days in a row. Every time Renbachien went to the bedroom, he would see the Empress in the same position without moving or speaking. Although he initially felt that this kind of Empress was quite interesting, after a long time, it was as if he was guarding a puppet and something was missing. Even when the Empress was angry, she was still cuter than this. Although the Empress took longer to comprehend than before, no one was worried. After all, with her strength, it wouldn't be a problem for her to not eat or drink for a few days. Most importantly, her breathing was very stable, and the red glow in her squinted eyes never weakened. It just made Renbachien miss the lively Empress a little. On the 5th day, Renbachien woke up in the morning and went to the Empress's bedroom to see if she had woken up. From afar he saw Qin Yuan running out. What's wrong? Is Her Majesty awake? Renbachien stopped Qin Yuan and asked. She just woke up. I'll go and prepare some food for Her Majesty. Qin Yuan bowed to Renbachien and hurriedly ran away. Renbachien was relieved to hear that the Empress had woken up. She had finally woken up. He hurried to the bedroom and saw the Empress sitting there in a daze. If it wasn't for her extremely bright eyes, he would have thought that she was still comprehending. "Your Majesty, how do you feel?" Rinpochen walked over and asked softly. "You are here." The Empress turned to look at Rinpochen, smiled, and said, "I have gained something this time. I'm about to break through again." The word again is well said. Rinpochen sighed. Super VIPs were indeed different from ordinary players. Then he suddenly thought of a very important question and said, "Your Majesty, if you break through again, I reckon that you won't be able to give birth to a son in a short period of time." Nonsense. The Empress immediately spat at him and blushed. Then she softened her voice and said, "There's still some time left." In fact, if it weren't for Rinpochen, the Empress would have broken through this time, but how could she say this? During breakfast, the Empress demonstrated to Rinpochen what it meant to have a godlike appetite. He didn't know if it was due to the great advancement in her cultivation, but the Empress needed a large amount of energy to transform her blood essence. She ate a 4-corned cow and 2 jumping goats for breakfast and barely felt 70% full. Chapter 641. Class dismissed. Just as Rinpochen uttered these 2 words, all the students in the room ran toward the backyard at lightning speed. However, a small figure was the fastest. In a few flashes, she landed in front of the toilet in the backyard. Then, she put her hands behind her back and stared fixedly at the students who were rushing over. "You are not allowed to use the toilet." Tong Lon looked at everyone. "Why?" Everyone widened their eyes and looked at Tong Lon with dissatisfaction. "You are not allowed to use it means you are not allowed to use it. Why are there so many whys?" Tong Lan's eyes glowed fiercely. She looked like she would teach anyone who dared to use the toilet a lesson. "What should we do then? We can't possibly pee in our pants, right? There will be a pungent smell during class. Even if you can stand it, we can't." Du Laolu snorted. "In 3 days, you can use it however you want. The black bamboo forest is so big. Isn't it enough for you?" Tong Lon swept her fierce gaze across everyone's faces, causing them to stare back at her. Seeing this, everyone thought about it and didn't want to be beaten up by Tong Lon over this matter. They ran to the corner of the wall, jumped over it, and headed straight for the black bamboo forest. However, the girls were a little helpless. The black bamboo forest wasn't small. If they ran too far away, they might not be able to return in time for class. If they were too close, there would be guys everywhere. "You can just use the toilet," Tong Lon said. She always gave the girls some preferential treatment. She let the girls go to the toilet. She calculated in her mind that the men's toilet didn't need to be cleaned. In that case, the women's toilet would be cleaned by Shigan, Zhuohua, and that great Xia woman. The 3 of them wouldn't be able to say anything, right? She hated herself for thinking of such a good idea so late. She had been cleaning for a few days for nothing. When the freshmen came to the toilet, Tong Lon repeated her plan. "Little girl, why should we listen to you?" A few guys laughed. Without saying a word, Tong Lon suddenly disappeared from where she was standing and appeared in front of the boys. She kicked each of them and sent 4 of them flying. However, when the last guy was about to attack, he was forced back by a punch. Tong Lon looked up and saw a 15 or 16-year-old guy. He looked ordinary, but his reaction was fast and his strength wasn't weak. "Little girl, be reasonable," that guy said angrily. "I'll only reason with you after you beat me." After saying this, Tong Lon disappeared once again. When she reappeared, she was above the boy's head and stomped down on his head. When the surrounding people heard what Tong Lon said, they were a little stunned. How could this be? You're being unreasonable if you can win, but you're only trying to be reasonable when you can't win. Tong Lon exchanged a few moves with that guy and had a whole new level of respect for him. She didn't expect there to be such an expert in this batch of freshmen. All the more reason to defeat him. At the thought of this, Tong Lan's speed increased by a few notches, and her strength increased. She threw punch after punch, and every time her fists collided with her opponents, there would be a loud explosion. Following the loud bangs, the young man kept retreating. His hands started to tremble and his face turned red. However, he didn't make a sound and just gritted his teeth. However, it seemed like he couldn't hold on much longer. Tong Lan made a half-turn in the air and punched the other party's chest again. The young man couldn't block it anymore and flew out like a cannonball. Umph! Tong Lan immediately stopped, and her small face was full of ferocity. Who else isn't convinced? Before she finished her sentence, a figure rushed over from afar. After flipping a few rounds in the air, her leg ruthlessly chopped down like a giant axe. Tong Lan met it with a punch, and the person flew out with a bang. Like a nail, Tong Lan was also smashed more than a foot into the ground. Zhuohua! Tong Lan was furious when she saw the girl who was wearing an animal skin short skirt and a tube top. She didn't allow them to use the men's toilet, so the other three could clean up the toilet. She had done such a good deed, but Zhuohua actually hit her? Why did you hit my younger brother? Zhuohua was also furious. Your younger brother? Tong Lan was stunned. She looked at the young man who had just run back and was sent flying by her. She couldn't see any resemblance between him and Zhuohua, be it the shape of his face or his eyes. No matter how she looked at him, there wasn't any resemblance. My third uncle's younger brother. Zhuohua said angrily. I didn't know. Tong Lan mumbled softly. Then she raised her head and said, I'm helping you guys relieve the pressure of cleaning the toilet. It's your brother's fault. What exactly is going on? Zhuohua looked at Tong Lan and the youth before asking. The young man snorted as he recounted what had just happened. You are too overbearing. Zhuohua glared at Tong Lan. You don't know how to appreciate my kindness. In any case, we can't use the men's toilet. Tong Lan gritted her teeth. No need, no need. Zhuohua said coldly. She turned to her brother and said, There's a huge purple bamboo forest behind us. You guys aren't afraid of being seen. Go there. A moment later, many freshmen appeared in the purple bamboo forest. No matter how they thought about it, they felt that something was amiss. Why did they have to go to the bathroom in the forest? Was there something wrong with it? Ren Baqian sat in his office, looked at the people in front of him, and said, Aha, it wasn't easy for me to make these students develop the habit of going to the toilet. Just because you don't clean up as much, you broke this rule? And it's only been a few days, and you're already fighting in school? Tong Lan was hesitant. At this moment, should she lower her head and show her remorse or raise her head and show her pride? She was Tong Lan, a genius. Of course, he couldn't lower his head like those idiots. Thinking of this, she raised her face proudly. This is Zhuo Wei's first offense. Copy the 3-character classic 100 times and clean the toilet for a week starting from next week. As for the two of you, it hasn't even been a week, and you're committing the same offense again. Copy the 3-character classic 200 times and extend your toilet cleaning time by half a month. When Zhuohua and Tong Lan heard this, their faces turned green. The fear of the 3-character classic surged into their minds again. Ever since he finished copying the last time, he had been dreaming about the 3-character classic for the past few days. He actually had to copy it again, and this time he had to copy even more. Principal, please whip me instead. Zhuohua said with a bitter expression. 60 lashes? Ren Baqian asked. Zhuohua nodded with a bitter face. She would rather be whipped than copy the 3-character classic. The whips of the Public Order Bureau are woven from the skin of the tail of a spike dragon. There are barbs on it, and a layer of skin will fall off after being whipped. If you suffer 60 lashes, I reckon that you will be disfigured. Ren Baqian said faintly. Are there any other punishments? Don't make me copy the 3-character classic. Zhuohua was on the verge of tears. Otherwise, how can I teach you a lesson? All of your brains are muscles, and your actions are faster than your brains. Go back and copy it, but you can copy it at home this time. Hand it over to me in 2 days. That's not right. Tong Lan suddenly said. What do you want to say? Ren Baqian looked over. Fighting in Lan City is only 3 lashes. Last time, you said that the punishment would be increased by 10 times in front of Her Majesty. This time, the punishment is obviously not in front of Her Majesty, so why is the punishment so heavy? Tong Lan looked up unconvinced. Ren Baqian sneered. I'm the principal, so what I say goes. The punishment for fighting in the school will be increased by 20 times. Tong Lan's face turned red with anger. She stared at Rinpochen fiercely as if she wanted to pounce on him and bite him. After holding it in for a long time, she said, "You are abusing your power. Yes, you are not clear about the rewards and punishments, and you are abusing your power." Well, that's right. And then? Rinpochen crossed his arms and looked at Tong Lan with an amused expression. The Zhuohua siblings were stunned. You admit it? You actually admitted it so casually? I won't give in. Tong Lan mumbled, "I," for a long time but couldn't think of anything to do with Rinpochen. Her face turned from red to black, and she ran out screaming. Do the two of you have anything else to say? If not, go back to class. Rinpochen looked at the siblings again. Let's go back to class, both of them said. Chapter 642. After the Empress woke up from her enlightenment, she pondered for another 2 days, or rather, settled down for 2 days before returning to normal. Follow me out of the palace. As soon as Rinpochen returned to the palace, he heard the Empress say this. We won't be having lunch in the palace either. Is your Majesty in a good mood today? Rinpochen laughed. I'm fine. It's just that I'm a little bored. The Water Empress said lightly. Your Majesty should go out and walk more. Reading 10,000 books is not as good as walking 10,000 miles. In ancient times, the Emperor of China was restricted from leaving the palace and had to make arrangements 2 months in advance. And when he left the palace in private, he had to worry about assassinations and danger. However, this wasn't a problem for the Empress. There were no restrictions on the Empress leaving the palace, and she was one of the top experts in the world. However, the Empress preferred to stay in the palace most of the time. In modern terms, she was purely a homebody. It was rare for her to suggest leaving the palace for a stroll, and Rinpochen was naturally happy to accompany her. Rinpochen returned to Pingle Park and changed into an ordinary set of clothes. When he arrived at the Empress's quarters, he realized that she was still wearing the red muslin dress that she had previously worn. Your Majesty, it's too easy to recognize you like this. You don't want to be recognized everywhere, right? Rinpochen asked. But there aren't many people who can recognize me, the Empress retorted. Not to mention Your Majesty's appearance, just Your Majesty's aura alone is not something that ordinary people can compare to. Even those who have not seen Your Majesty before can sense it. Moreover, there are many people in the city who have seen Your Majesty before. As long as they see you once, they will definitely not forget you. In addition, I'm by your side. I'm afraid that many people will think that the two of them are walking together. Rinpochen laughed. The Empress frowned and thought about it. Sure enough, it was easy to be recognized with Rinpochen by her side. She looked at him and said, That's your fault. Rinpochen shrugged. I don't want to change my clothes. The Empress was a little worried. In Rinpochen's eyes, the frown on her face because she didn't want to change her clothes was a little cute. Your Majesty. Rinpochen thought for a while and remembered that there was an ancient question and answer that was very suitable for this situation. The ancients said, when naked, should you cover your upper body or lower body? Answer, my face is blocked. I'll cover my face then. Rinpochen spread his hands again. The Empress originally thought that he would have some good suggestions, but she didn't expect him to actually give such a constructive suggestion. I'm serious, the Empress repeated earnestly. I'm serious as well. Rinpochen asked, Is there any other way? The Empress thought about it seriously. It seemed that there was really no better way. A moment later, the Empress appeared in a red muslin dress with a white undergarment underneath. Her face was covered with a red scarf. On the other hand, Rinpochen was wearing a green robe with a black cloth covering his face. The two of them swaggered out of the palace. The guards behind them looked like they wanted to laugh, but at the same time, they didn't want to. I feel that this is very silly, the Empress couldn't help but say. I'm really out of my mind today. I actually believed your nonsense. When I get back, I'll order 2 sets of clothes. One set will have female written on the chest and big written on the back. The other set will have male written on the chest and thief written on the back. Pfft. The Empress spat. The two of them strolled through Beihong district, attracting countless gazes. After all, with their attire, it was hard not to attract attention. I remember eating here when I was young, and the taste was pretty good, the Empress said as she looked up at the signboard when they walked past a restaurant. Do you want to go up and try it? I haven't had lunch yet. Renbachyan stopped and looked up, only to see the words, Shanhui Restaurant. If he remembered correctly, this restaurant seemed to be a place that the children of the officials liked to hang out. He wondered if the Empress would put on a thrilling show when she went up there. The Empress really had this idea. She immediately nodded after hearing Renbachyan's words and said, "All right." Seeing the Empress nod, Renbachyan immediately became excited. He was waiting to see who would be unlucky. He pulled the Empress into the restaurant and headed for the second floor. Customer. A burly waiter with a face that looked more like a bandit than a waiter immediately tried to stop the two of them. Are we not allowed to go up to the second floor? Renbachyan asked, wondering why the show was about to start so soon. Of course not. It's just that there are too many people on the second floor and it's a little noisy. It's fine if the two of you want to go up. The fierce-looking waiter waved his hand and sounded simple and honest. Those who could wear gauze in Lan City weren't ordinary people. Those who could work as waiters here were definitely not fools. How could they not be tactful? It's fine. We like it when there are more people. The livelier it is. Renbachyan said. Renbachyan pulled the Empress all the way up to the second floor and saw that there were indeed many people there. Renbachyan could even recognize a few of them. Hong Wu's granddaughter, Hong Xian, Lu Ruoyao, and Du Changkong's two cousins were actually there. Renbachyan even saw two students from his school. One was Du Laolu, and the other was Su Peng. They were both children of the officials, but their talents were worlds apart when compared to others. Renbachyan and the Empress attracted some attention when they came up. They were puzzled. Weren't the two of them hot to cover their faces on such a hot day? However, when they sensed that the two of them were man-will experts, they immediately turned their attention elsewhere and ignored them. Renbachyan pulled the Empress to a corner and sat down. He found that the people at Du Laoyu's table seemed to be arguing about something. Du Laolu, you have been in that school for a year. What have you learned? Teach me? Maybe I can even call you Mr. Du. I heard that's how the people in Great Xia address scholars. A young man laughed. Du Laolu snorted and couldn't be bothered with him. On the contrary, Su Peng was somewhat dissatisfied and asked, Tu, what's the meaning of this? Are you here to look for trouble? How can that be? I'm envious. After all, there are so many people here, but only a few of you were selected to study at the school. It's obvious that you are different from us. You are scholars and I want to study too. The young man called Tu Yu, who was about 16 or 17 years old, said in a weird tone. His words caused a lot of laughter. Everyone knew that those who were selected to study at the school were useless. Stop talking nonsense in a weird tone. Su Peng slammed the table angrily. Why are you so impatient? I was just saying it casually. However, don't tell me that you didn't learn anything after staying there for a year. Otherwise, you can enlighten us. You want to learn? Go to the school and listen, but with your brain, you can't even add or subtract single-digit numbers. I'm afraid that you won't understand even if you go. Du Laolu couldn't help but sneer. That's why I asked you to tell us, right? Tu Yu didn't take it seriously and smiled at the others instead. What's there to talk about with you? Do you know chemistry? Do you know physics? Do you know what a lever is? Do you know what an internal combustion engine is? Look, you don't even know what I'm talking about. What's the point of me telling you? Have you heard of playing the lute to a cow? Du Laolu sneered. Chapter 643. What's the point of talking about those things that you don't understand? Tu Yu was annoyed by Du Laoyu's sarcasm. You won't understand even if I explain, so there's no need for me to waste my saliva. Du Laolu spread his hands and raised his face as if he was looking down on Tu Yu. He was very familiar with this expression as it was always on her face. What can you bunch of useless people do? Tuyu was infuriated by Du Laoyu's expression and shouted. The people around them didn't stop the two of them from arguing and looked like they were watching a good show. Ever since Du Laolu and Su Peng entered the academy, they had drifted apart and weren't on the same path anymore. At least the salt you are eating now was produced by Yagüe in the mountains. Du Laolu laughed. That has nothing to do with you. I can only say that the gigolo is indeed capable. After being suppressed by Du Laolu, Tuyu's imposing manner immediately dropped. However, he gritted his teeth and said, that's all he's capable of. He can't even beat an ordinary person, let alone you bunch of useless people. Du Laolu was annoyed by Tuyu calling him useless people. With a livid face, he said, it's not up to you to say whether I'm useless or not. Great Xia isn't governed by a strong fist, but by a good brain. Yagüe's martial arts aren't great, but he can do much more than people like you. We haven't done much yet, but our big guy is more useful than 100 of you. Du Laolu stood up from his chair and said, let's go. Su Peng also stood up with a sneer and swaggered off with Du Laolu. However, before the two of them could take 2 steps, the table behind them flew up with a bang and crashed into their backs. The food spilled all over the floor and a lot of it landed on them. Huh, what can you two useless people do? Tuyu sneered. You. Su Peng got up from the floor and glared at Tuyu. What about me? The one with the biggest fist is the boss. This has been the case since ancient times. Tuyu laughed and said, you are just useless people who have been abandoned. Do you really think you can learn anything from that gigolo? Su Peng, let's go. Du Laolu suppressed his anger, glanced at Tuyu, and pulled Su Peng away. By the way, Du Laolu, you like Shijiue, right? My father went to propose the day before yesterday, and her father also agreed. Tuyu laughed loudly again. When Du Laolu heard this, he stopped in his tracks and clenched his fists tightly. According to Great Xia, she and I are a well-matched match. How can a good-for-nothing like you be worthy of her? Tuyu said from behind Du Laolu. Tuyu. Hong Xian shouted coldly. Hong Xian, this has nothing to do with you. This is between him and me. Wrong, it's a matter between me and Shijiue. I'm just informing him that he can come and watch the ceremony. Tuyu glanced at Hong Xian and said fearlessly. Furthermore, you don't seem to have any friendship with this trash, right? Hong Xian snorted coldly and didn't say anything else. Old Six, let's go. I'll accompany you to ask around. Su Peng pulled Du Laolu along. What do you want to ask in my old wife's house? Tuyu teased. Du Laolu pursed his lips tightly and didn't look back as he walked down the stairs step by step. Su Peng followed him worriedly. You caused trouble for Du Laolu today because of Shijiue, right? I know that you like Shijiue, but it doesn't matter if you cause trouble for him. However, if he hears what you said about the principal of the Black Bamboo Academy, you won't have a good time, someone said. It's just a few words of truth. What can he do to me? Tuyu frowned and said forcefully. Let's go. Hong Xian got up and left, and a few people followed suit. I quite like what you said. Lu Royale patted Tuyu's shoulder and hurriedly followed suit. Du Chengkong's 2 cousins got up and left as well. More than a dozen people left one after another, and the second floor was suddenly half empty. Seeing this, the others felt that it was pointless and got up to leave. When the food was served, only Renbaqian and the Empress were left. Seeing that there was no one around, the Empress and Renbaqian removed their veils. Are you angry? The Empress asked. It's not worth it. Renbaqian shook his head. In all fairness, it was impossible for him not to be angry when he saw his students being treated like this. On the contrary, he didn't care about the words that were said about him. However, after thinking about it carefully, the thoughts of these young people were probably the thoughts of most of the officials in the imperial court. After all, it wasn't easy to change decades or even centuries of knowledge. Their eyes and thoughts had long been blinded. Unless the Empress was personally impacted by modern technology and saw the future with her own eyes, how many people would be able to see it clearly? Even if new things entered their lives and changed their lives, many people would still carry on living with what they knew all along. In the end, they would be reduced to people who were eliminated. Not to mention now, Many of the things that he did were only known by the Empress and a few people. Most people were unaware of it. There was still a long way to go. What he needed to do was to change this world bit by bit, change their lives, and let them accept the changes in this world. Then, they would choose to follow the times or be eliminated. There are many things that I know and understand. However, even the officials in the imperial court don't understand these things, let alone others. The Empress held Rinpoche's hand and said with a comforting voice, "I know." Rinpoche smiled. In fact, the impression that Du Laolu gave me in the past was that he was active but reckless. I didn't have high expectations of him. Today, I have a whole new level of respect for him. He actually knows how to use his brain and mouth. I thought you would be in a bad mood. After all, you have done a lot of things. The Empress looked at Rinpoche's face carefully and smiled. He didn't seem angry at all. I'm not that childish. Rinpoche grabbed the Empress's hand and used his fingertips to draw circles on the back of her hand. They will naturally know after a few years. Your Majesty, my students are much more precious than them. I also have high hopes for them. The Empress nodded. So, Your Majesty, can you bestow him a marriage or something? Rinpoche asked. You just said that you don't bicker with children. The Empress immediately withdrew her hand with a funny look on her face. I was just saying. Rinpoche laughed. To grow up, one has to experience all kinds of things and have all kinds of insights. Just like this time, they should know what time waits for no man means. They should also know that they should work hard for themselves. In fact, from a certain perspective, I have to thank you. By the way, what's his relationship with Minister Tu? How would I know about this? The Empress asked casually. Rinpoche nodded and put this matter at the bottom of his heart. This time around, he wanted to play a good show where the Empress visited incognito and angrily punished the second generation of officials. In the end, he saw a dispute. The encounter of his two students made him understand the thoughts of many people, and it also made him feel a sense of urgency that time waited for no man. He couldn't possibly let his students go out with supercilious looks, could he? That would be because he was incompetent as the principal. After lunch, the two of them put on their veils and walked out of the restaurant to blend into the crowd. Before long, they heard Tong Jingye's loud voice. Your Majesty? Why are you out of the palace today? Why are you still dressed like this? They saw Tong Jingye sitting on a fork-horned cow, looking in their direction with a surprised look on his face. The crowd was quiet at first, then followed his gaze and looked at the two of them. Soon after, there was an uproar. Rinpoche and the Empress's heart skipped a beat. They actually met this guy when they came out for a stroll. Your Majesty, didn't you bring any guards? Tong Jingye jumped off his horse and walked toward the two of them, shouting as he walked. Your Majesty is here? I actually saw Your Majesty. The corner of the Empress's eyes twitched, and she looked murderous. It wasn't easy for her to come out for a stroll, but it was ruined by this damned guy. I remember asking you to wait for me at Hanyuan Palace Hall a few days ago. Why didn't I see you when I woke up? The Empress asked coldly as she removed her veil. It's indeed Your Majesty. The surrounding crowd immediately surrounded the street and looked at the Empress with fanatical and worshipful eyes. The news of the Empress's appearance on the street was still spreading. Chapter 644. Finally, the Empress left with Rinpoche from the roof beam. The emperor of a nation who came out to visit incognito ended up fleeing for her life. Of course, she didn't let Tong Jingye off the hook and kicked him out of the street. Tong Jingye crashed into a house and landed on another street. He lay there pondering for a long time before clapping his hands and understanding what the Empress was referring to. Rinpoche, you tricked me. The Empress heard Tong Jingye shouting from afar and asked, What did you trick him into? I forgot. Rinpoche replied. The Empress nodded and didn't ask any further. The two walked around the Baishur district for another half a day. While the other districts of Lan City were gradually desolate, this place that sold all kinds of weapons, farming tools, and ironware was much more lively. Thanks to the weapons left behind by the Great Xia army and the iron ore brought back from the Yun nation by the auxiliary army, the price of iron ore in Lan City had dropped, and the ironware market was much more prosperous than before. Ren Baqian even saw imitation manual fans here. It was the kind that he made in the beginning. He pulled it with a rope and it spun for a while. The blades of this kind of fan were made of wood and sold well at 1 tael of silver. The two then walked around the Shirhu district. This used to be the largest trading place for animal hides, but it was now almost closed. Have you ever thought of selling something? The income of the national treasury is too low, and one has complained many times, the Empress asked as they walked. Although the salt produced by the Ministry of Works and the Ministry of Revenue can replenish the national treasury, the silver has been used to fill the previous deficit. Furthermore, the price of salt in Dayo is too high, and it's a huge burden on the people. In particular, as you said just now, the animal hides of the Aborigines have rotted, so there's naturally no income. Therefore, I want to reduce the price of salt by about half so that the people can afford it. Did someone tell Her Majesty about this? Ren Baqian smiled. I know what they are thinking, but they aren't wrong. This nation belongs to me, and you have to share some of my worries. That's why I came to ask you. Other people can have their own ideas and keep the good things in their hands, but I can't because I'm the Empress. You are my husband, so you can't do it either. The Empress said slowly. Of course, what Your Majesty wants to do is what I should do. Ren Baqian laughed. After that, the two of them found a place to sit down on the street. Ren Baqian pondered for a long time before saying, we should collect some fur. But the Empress was puzzled. Ever since the start of the war, the merchants of the 3 countries have disappeared. The fur of the mountain people cannot be sold and they have all rotted away. Naturally, the mountain people have no income. Without income, they naturally have no spending power. If they were to collect the furs now, it would give the mountain people some income. With this income, they could spend it in the city and purchase the necessities they needed to survive. Secondly, tanning furs required manpower and could increase the income of these people. At the same time, it could also improve the situation of some people. The money in the warehouse was just a number, but when it was circulated, it could stimulate the entire market and change the lives of many people. Finally, the price of furs is extremely low now. As long as we can find a market and sell the furs to Great Xia, we will be able to make a fortune. The Empress was a little confused when she heard what Ren Baqian said. Dayo's business model was very primitive and there were very few types of taxes. As a result, they didn't pay much attention to business. As Ren Baqian spoke, the Empress listened attentively. In any case, Ren Baqian was better than her in this aspect. However, she was rather happy that the fur of the mountain people wouldn't rot away. Just like what Ren Baqian said, at least this could solve some problems. This matter can only be done by you. If you want to take money from the national treasury, one will go crazy, the Empress said. Naturally. Ren Baqian nodded his head. If he wanted to marry the Empress, he would naturally have to take care of the mess in Dayo. He didn't have any conflict in his heart at all. What they want is spices, right? Ren Baqian muttered to himself. This thing is in the hands of Your Majesty, no one dares to touch it. However, if it is given to them, it will be planted in every household. With the current price of spices, as long as they have access to it, they won't let it go. And it is extremely easy for those ministers to get the seeds of spices from the Ministry of Works. At that time, the most likely outcome will be that all the farmland around Lan City will be filled with spices. Not only will the price of spices plummet, it will also affect the planting of grain crops. After a few years, when the situation has stabilized, I will give it to them. I can take out some other things, such as daily necessities like soap, cotton, and textile technology. As long as you think it's possible. The Empress put one hand on Ren Baqian's shoulder, rested her chin on the back of her hand, and naughtily blew into Ren Baqian's ear. She still remembered that every time Ren Baqian came close to her ear and spoke, she would feel an itch from her ear all the way to her heart. Therefore, she wanted to see how Ren Baqian would react. Ren Baqian let out an exaggerated scream. He tilted his head and knocked it on the Empress's forehead. The empress snorted and sat up straight. Rinpoche's scream was too exaggerated, and his acting wasn't good enough. "Let's go back," the empress said. "Okay." The next day, Rinpoche went to the Ministry of Works and taught Tong Jinye how to make soap. Then he helped Tong Jinye plan the construction of Daeyeo's first soap factory. Following which he started to hire workers, open a shop, and set up a leather processing factory on a piece of wasteland outside the city. After a period of time, a shop on Lon City's Jinyang Street put up a sign that said, "Buying furs." The shop had only been open for a few days, and it was already packed with aboriginals who heard the news. The furs that had been piled up for a long time and had even started to rot were transported into Lon City in large quantities. Then, they were weighed in the courtyard behind the shop. Ordinary furs were measured by caddies, just like collecting waste paper. The price was slightly lower than the price that the merchants from the three nations had paid, but this was enough to make the aboriginals ecstatic. After knowing that this shop had the backing of the imperial family, many people saw this as a good deed done by the empress to show compassion for the people. After all, Daeyeou didn't have the means of tanning furs. Furthermore, there was a war going on outside, and the trade routes were all cut off. The only reason why the empress did this was because she pitied the people. In an instant, the empress's reputation rose by another level. An emperor who could show compassion and treat the people well was enough to make the emperor loved and respected by the people. Moreover, the empress was the strongest aboriginal. She could win battles and treat the people well, so she was the best emperor in the hearts of the people. During this period of time, there were some changes in the war in the Yun nation. First of all, the elephant soldiers appeared on the battlefield. This kind of thick-skinned behemoth reaped great results from the very beginning. Zedonglai used the elephant soldiers as the vanguard to attack the enemy and annihilated nearly 100,000 soldiers from the Yun nation in one battle. Of course, more than half of these elephant soldiers were lost in this battle. They could be said to have become consumables and were crippled in one battle. However, Zedonglai's goal was achieved. This battle directly reduced the available military strength of the Yun nation by half. Chapter 645. Shuiyang City, Yun Nation. In the backyard of an inconspicuous grocery store. This was originally a secret property of the Zhang family, but after a few people arrived half a month ago, the people from the Zhang family withdrew. At this moment, a man was standing there with his hands behind his back, looking at a map in front of him. Daeyeou's vanguard was hundreds of kilometers away from Shuiyang City, and there was Suyang City in the middle. A man walked behind the man and said, "Chief, Yang Jiao has gone missing." The man turned around and asked, "What happened? When did he go missing?" This man was 50 to 60 years old, dressed in green, and had a dignified appearance. He was an old acquaintance of Rinpoche, the chief of the Golden Ring sect, Zhan Changkong. He was one of the Baihu who had been transferred from Tianjing Basin to the Yun nation. Yang Jiao said that he went to investigate the barracks last night and didn't come back. "I went to look for him but didn't find any traces," the man said. "Was he caught?" Zhan Changkong frowned. "I think it might be." The man hesitated and didn't dare to speak. "What might it be?" Zhan Changkong's face suddenly darkened. "He might have run away. I've felt that something was wrong with him these few days, as if he was preparing for something. Although he's not very skilled, he's smart and good at concealment. No one knows our background, so the possibility of him being caught is very small. Combined with his performance these days, I think the chances of him running away are higher. I've long felt that Yang Jiao is cold-hearted and unreliable." Another middle-aged man shouted after hearing this. "Is there still a chance to catch him?" Zhan Changkong asked with an ugly expression. "If he left the city in the middle of the night, we won't be able to catch him now. After all, we don't have enough manpower," the man said. "Chief, it's fine if he runs away, but I'm afraid that he will tell on us. We can't stay here any longer. If he tells on us, the army will be here by now. However, to be on the safe side, we really can't stay here." Lu Dong informed the previous contact and asked him to arrange another place to stay. Su Yi, Inform the others to pack their things and temporarily evacuate. And you, go and look for Yang Jiu's whereabouts again. Perhaps he really met with an accident. Zhang Changkong made the arrangements one by one. After making arrangements for everyone, Zhang Changkong turned to the last man, whose face was wrapped in cloth and only revealed one eye, and said, Ling Ziquan, if Yang Jiu really ran away, do you think he would inform on us and sell us out? Sect Master, only you, me, and Lu Dong know about the contact. Even if he snitches, the Yun Nation will only know that we are a group of people. Just be more careful in the future, Ling Ziquan, the outer sanctum deacon, said. During that scouting mission, he had brought up the rear for Zhang Changkong. In the end, half of his face and one of his eyes had been chopped off, but he had come back alive. Zhang Changkong and the others changed their residence and monitored it for a few days. Only when they realized that there were no movements did they feel slightly relieved. Although Yang Jiu had run away, he still had some camaraderie and did not betray all these people. However, at this moment, in the capital of the Yun Nation, Prime Minister, the guards of Xian City caught a person during their patrol. It is said that he came from Dayo, so they sent him here overnight. A scholar with a long beard, wearing a long gown and a square scarf on his head said, Oh, from Dayo? The Aboriginals? The person who was addressed as Prime Minister was a man in his 50s or 60s. His figure was round, or rather, two spheres joined together. On the smaller sphere, there was a pair of small eyes shining brightly. He was the Prime Minister of the Yun Nation. Currently, he was angrily called a treacherous Prime Minister by the scholars in the city. He was the treacherous Prime Minister who controlled the imperial court, turned the emperor into a puppet, formed cliques for personal gain, blocked speech, and demoted people with different political views. Until now, he only cared about internal strife, Zheng Qingyan. No, it is said that he came from Tianjin Basin. Furthermore, he said some things, the scholar said. Tianjin Basin was pacified by the Aboriginals half a year ago. What? Zheng Qingyan was shocked. The Aboriginals have pacified Tianjin Basin for half a year? Yes, sir. That group of barbarians actually pacified Tianjin Basin for half a year, but they still act as if Tianjin Basin hasn't been pacified. Why do you think they are doing this? Zheng Qingyan got up and walked a few steps in the room. Almost every step he took caused the flesh on his body to tremble. It could be said that his entire body was made up of fat. If the news of Tianjin Basin's pacification were to spread, Great Xia would definitely not send out their troops so easily. They only needed to face the Yun Nation and the Qin Nation. However, they concealed this news and acted as if the Protectorate of the South was implicated in the quagmire. Now, Great Xia has once again replaced their military strength with new recruits. They have gathered a total of 530,000 soldiers, but they are still concealing this news. I am guessing that their target is this Great Xia army. In other words, their target is Great Xia. That's right. This is what I guessed as well. Otherwise, there is no reason for them to firmly conceal this news unless their target is Great Xia. Zheng Qingyan laughed heartily. After laughing, he looked at the middle-aged scholar and said, In that case, their attack on the Yun Nation this time, just like before, it is for plundering. The barbarians don't know how to build and only know how to destroy. They don't know how to occupy and only know how to plunder, the middle-aged scholar said resolutely. I knew it. Since this is the case, the news of the barbarians pacifying Tianjin Basin can't be leaked. We have to drag Great Xia into this. Kill them. Yes. However, neither of them knew that there was another piece of information that the man didn't say. This time, the rearguard commandery had sent more than 400 people into the Yun Nation to inquire about the situation in the various cities. The reason why he didn't say this wasn't because of their friendship, but because he wanted to use this information to save his life and even ask for a reward when he met the Yun Nation's officials. However, it was this little thought that made him never have the chance to say this information again. This also made the two of them never have the chance to know this information again. Otherwise, they would definitely reconsider Dayo's goal in attacking the Yun Nation this time. However, the current information made them misjudge Dayo's goal again. They continued to immerse themselves in internal strife and worked hard for a more important goal. To them, it was a good thing that some cities had been breached. Those warlords had their own armies, and it was difficult for the imperial court to govern them. This was a situation that had been formed since the establishment of the Yun nation. Originally, there was hope for this situation to be broken decades ago, but the emperor and the prime minister at that time were short-sighted and missed this opportunity. However, they wouldn't miss this opportunity again. Now that the cities had been breached, those warlords were either dead or had fled. Even after the barbarians retreated, their foundations had been swept clean. The imperial court could grasp all of those cities in its hands, and its control would be greatly enhanced. It could even create a centralized imperial court like Great Xia's. For the Yun nation, this was definitely more beneficial than detrimental. It could even be said that it would be a great contribution for generations to come. Chapter 646. The backyard of Black Bamboo Academy was bustling with activity every day. Classes were held in the morning, and in the afternoon, it became a workshop for the students. Every afternoon, there were endless sounds of smithing and arguments. At first, only the students from last year were busy here. Later on, it attracted some new students to watch from the side. The seniors were arguing over a drawing or discussing something with a blacksmith. However, whenever they wanted to ask what they were doing, the seniors would always say mysteriously, "You will know when the time comes. It will definitely shock you." Qing Lian was naturally attracted over. Every afternoon, she would sit in a corner and watch them busy. Although she didn't know what they were doing, her intuition told her that they were doing something interesting. Therefore, she watched as a huge thing gradually took shape amid the arguments. It was something she had never seen before. There was a row of wheels under an iron bucket that was placed horizontally. At this moment, she was sitting on the wall and watching them busy in the courtyard. From time to time, she would look down the wall and see Rinpochen and a young girl sitting opposite each other. The young girl was about 15 or 16 years old. Her hair was simply tied up in a knot. It was a pity that her hair hung like a bird's nest at the back of her head. The young girl was wearing an animal skin tube top and a short skirt. Her exposed bronze-colored skin was full of health and wildness. The young girl was Zhuohua, and she had a confused look on her face. Rinpochen pushed the chess piece back and said, "Only when a horse moves in the sun can an elephant move in the field." "Teacher, what?" Zhuohua looked up with a blank look on her face. "These are the rules. Everything in the world is under the rules. Heaven and earth have their own rules, society has its own rules, and chess has its own rules. Whatever we do has to be within the rules because each of us is a part of the rules. The smart way is to understand the rules and go with the flow. The stupid way is to shout that they want to go against the heavens and break the rules," Rinpochen said slowly. "What if I kick over this chessboard now?" Zhuohua asked with a twinkle in her eyes, looking eager to try. "Then I won't play with you. Everyone is playing on the chessboard. If you kick over the chessboard, how can others play with you? The next time I see you, I will hide far away." Rinpochen laughed. Qing Lian, who was sitting on the tree, fell into deep thought as she listened to this childish reply. Rinpochen was right. Everyone was within the rules, and everyone was also a part of the rules. If he wanted to do something, he had to follow the rules. Even if the change of dynasties seemed to break the heavens, it was actually done according to the rules. The change of dynasties in the past had always caused the people to have no way of making a living. The people were filled with grievances, and in the end, the flames of war rose everywhere. In the end, the dynasty was destroyed. These were the rules. If a dynasty was at its peak and wanted to change dynasties, no one would support you, so you would definitely fail. Zhuohua patiently played chess with Rinpochen. After he took a step, she quickly picked up a chess piece and placed it. Chess is the same as life. You need to see 10 moves before you can make a move. Because if he made a wrong move, he couldn't go back. The only difference is that you can restart a game of chess, but you can't in life. "There's no chance to restart," Rinpochen said after eating Zhuohua's chariot. Zhuohua scratched her head and quickly ate his cannon. Qin Lian almost laughed out loud on the tree. Checkmate. Rinpoche slapped the chessboard. People will always encounter all kinds of things in life. Many times, they will be blinded by the things in front of them, unable to see the danger behind them, and forget their goals. Therefore, you have to remind yourself at all times. You have to reflect on yourself 3 times a day. Rinpoche threw the chess piece on the chessboard, stood up, and left. Zhuohua and Zhuowei looked at Rinpoche's back with admiration. They felt that his words were very profound, and they couldn't understand what he was saying at all. After Rinpoche left, Zhuohua turned to ask Zhuowei, "Why did teacher say all this?" "Because you are stupid." Before Zhuowei could answer, they heard Qin Lian chuckling from the top of the wall. Zhuohua immediately raised her head and looked up, her hand already touching the dagger at her waist. "Look, your muscles have grown into your brain. Besides fighting and killing, your brain is only filled with food, right?" What he meant was for you to use your brain more. There's no turning back in life. The more you use your brain, the less you will take the wrong path. However, I think he's playing the lute to a cow since you won't be able to remember it anyway. Qin Lian gently wiped her lips with her finger and smiled. Zhuohua's finger slowly left the hilt of the dagger, but she wasn't angry. She raised her head and asked, "Are all scholars like teacher? There are many scholars in Great Xia, right?" "There are many scholars, but there aren't many like Principal Ren," Qin Lian replied seriously after thinking for a while. "There are all kinds of people, and scholars are the same. Most of them are like flies for personal gain or for fame. There aren't many who are truly broad-minded." Up until now, Qin Lian still remembered what Rinpoche once said, "Knowledge knows no boundaries." It was this sentence that completely reversed her impression of Rinpoche. "Is that why you came here to study?" Zhuohua stood up and asked. "It's just a coincidence." Qin Lian smiled and said, "I came here for something else, but I'm very interested in the things that are being taught here." "Will you use these things in Great Xia and then attack us?" Zhuohua looked at her with a burning gaze, pursed her lips, and looked very serious and solemn. It was as if she would slash Qin Lian with her dagger if she said yes. Qin Lian shook her head and said, "Life is only 100 years, and mine is even shorter. Instead of thinking about it, I might as well think of a way to live longer. Then I won't hit you next time." Zhuohua waved her hand, smiled heartily, turned around, and skipped away. Qin Lian sighed. Zhuohua spoke as if she could beat her. However, this girl was really naive. Looking at the time, her book should have arrived by now, right? Hopefully, there wouldn't be any problems along the way. It wasn't a good feeling to owe others for their tuition fees. She swung her legs on the wall in a daze and only returned to the tavern in the evening. "Have you found the whereabouts of the person you are looking for?" Ning Kaichen asked with a smile after seeing her. "I stopped looking for him a long time ago. Anyway, it doesn't have much to do with me." Qin Lian put her hands behind her head and looked at the ceiling. "Someone came to look for you in the afternoon. When he saw that you weren't around, he said that he would come back at night," Ning Kaichen said. "Oh, what kind of person?" Qin Lian perked up upon hearing this. "He's from Great Xia and looks like he's injured. Help me peel the potatoes? I see that you carry a sword every day, so your swordsmanship must be very good. Just peel off the skin of these potatoes." Ning Kaichen placed 6 potatoes on the table. "Is it delicious?" "I've asked around. It can be fried, mixed with mashed potatoes, or used to stew meat. This will be it for tonight." "Oh!" Qin Lian picked up the potatoes in her hand and looked at them. They were slightly bigger than a fist. She then unsheathed the long sword on her back. With a flash of the sword, the skin on the potatoes fell off in circles. "What a powerful swordsmanship!" Ning Kaichen laughed. "It's all right." Qin Lian peeled the 6 potatoes and threw them to Ning Kaichen. Then, she took out the dictionary that Rinpoche gave her and flipped through it. After an hour, the tavern was filled with the strong aroma of stewed meat. It was much more fragrant than usual. "Ah, did you use spices, big sister?" After a while, the 2 of them sat at the table. In front of them was a pot of meat and potato stew, a plate of side dishes, and a pot of fruit wine. Chapter 647. Checkmate. Zhuohua excitedly slapped the chessboard, sending sawdust flying all over the place. Rinpochian's general and Zhuohua's horse turned into powder with this slap, and even a piece of the chessboard was missing. Hey, I won, right? Teacher, you said that if I won, you would give me meat for a month, right? Zhuohua held the chessboard with both hands and stared at Rinpochian with bright eyes. Where are the chess pieces? Rinpochian asked calmly. Although the chess pieces are gone, I have checkmated. How can you talk about winning or losing when you don't even have any chess pieces? Rinpochian laughed and swept the chess pieces aside. Teacher, you are cheating. Zhuohua's eyes widened in anger. Remember, the more you are about to succeed, the more you have to be patient. Otherwise, it will be easy to fall short of success. Rinpochian smiled at Zhuohua with tolerance, got up, and left. As Rinpochian walked back, he stretched his back and thought to himself, I have to find someone else to play chess with next time. Zhuohua only played 2 games with me, and she didn't even think before she played. She just relied on her intuition to place the chess pieces and won. He hated playing with these cheats the most. Principal. Qin Lian caught up with him. What's the matter? Rinpochian turned his head and asked doubtfully. Qin Lian threw an object wrapped in silk to Rinpochian and said, I promised you. Rinpochian reached out to catch it and knew that it was an animal hide scroll. He casually stuffed the scroll into his clothes, turned around, and waved before leaving. When he returned to Pingle Park, he saw Tian Tian and Gun Gun lying on the ground, snoring loudly. The listening machine was sitting on Gun Gun's head and digging out something from its fur. Rinpochian initially thought that it was picking out lice, but he didn't expect it to take out a few dried fruits and stuff them into its mouth. It even threw one to Rinpochian and winked at him. Is this a share for those who see it? Rinpochian took the dried fruit, smelled it, and clenched it in his fist. It was better not to eat this thing because it had grown fur on it. Rinpochian casually knocked on its head. After returning to his room, he took out the scroll and opened the silk wrapping it, revealing a very simple and unadorned booklet made of an unknown animal hide. This animal hide booklet gave him a very familiar feeling. It was simply too familiar. Because he had been reading the same animal skin book for an entire year, every word, every drawing, and every detail was engraved in his heart. He was so familiar with the feel of this animal hide that he could feel it just by touching it. No matter who touched the same beast's skin for a year, they would not be unfamiliar with it. It can't be, right? Rinpochian's heart skipped a beat. The Rui visualization that he had obtained was a cultivation method that only allowed him to reach the Earth embryo realm. After reaching the Earth embryo realm, there was no information on how to enter the spirit wheel realm, let alone the contents of the spirit wheel realm. Therefore, he placed his hopes on the people on Earth. He first gave them ordinary martial arts, followed by intermediate martial arts. He hoped that with enough samples, he would one day be able to use a supercomputer to deduce the later parts of Rui visualization. As for this animal hide booklet, Qin Lian previously mentioned that it was the middle volume of the ancient scroll of methods. It was a method to cultivate the spirit and was extremely useful for crossing the path to heaven and reaching the spirit wheel level. Could it be that this booklet and his Rui visualization came from the same source and were from the same set of martial arts? At the thought of this, Rinpochian immediately flipped open the animal hide booklet and was greeted by 8 large words. The birth and destruction of the original body can give birth to all kinds of techniques. The 8 words were perfectly round and full of a sense of perfection. Rinpochian's eyes were fixed on the words for a long time. In his eyes, these 8 words were constantly falling off, and new words were constantly being born and destroyed, repeating endlessly. Both of Rinpochian's eyes were attracted to that page. He watched as countless perfectly round words were born and destroyed. After an unknown period of time, Rinpochian felt a wave of fatigue and fell onto his bed. At the moment when Rinpochian fell, the metal chain and the golden spear in his mind were ejected. The metal chain crawled on Rinpochian's body like a snake and finally wrapped itself tightly around him. It was as if it was taking revenge for being ejected from Rinpochian's sea of knowledge. After more than 4 hours, Rinpoche slowly opened his eyes and felt dizzy. What happened? Rinpoche wanted to get up, but he realized that he was tied up tightly and couldn't move. When he looked down carefully, he realized that the metal chain had actually tied him up like a dumpling. Let go! Rinpoche reprimanded. Only then did the metal chain reluctantly release Rinpoche. It plunged into Rinpoche's forehead as if there was a void there. Rinpoche sat up and touched the animal hide book in his hand. If he didn't guess wrongly, he had overexerted himself just now. This book was really scary. He was actually attracted by the words on the first page and couldn't break free. Eventually he fainted. If he wasn't strong enough, he wouldn't even be able to read it. It seemed like he had to reach the earth wheel level before he could read this book. What made him extremely concerned was that the 8 words in the book were very similar to the words on Rui visualization. They should have been written by the same person. It was a pity that he saw too little content. He didn't know if it was as he thought, that Rui visualization was a cultivation method for consolidating one's foundation, and this book was an advanced method. As for the name of Ancient Scroll of Methods, it probably came from the last 2 words, 10,000 methods. Sir Ren, Her Majesty is calling for you. Qing Wan knocked on the door and called out. Got it, wait for me for a moment. After Rinpoche shouted, he took out Rui visualization from the room and brought it along with another book to let the Empress take a look. Sir Ren, you don't look too good? Qing Wan asked after seeing Rinpoche come out. Just a small matter. Rinpoche smiled. He still felt mentally tired, but he felt much better after a good night's sleep. Her Majesty asked about you twice in the afternoon. Qing Wan covered her mouth and laughed. Rinpoche followed Qing Wan to the Empress's bedroom. Upon entering the room, he saw the Empress sitting there bored to death. There was a table in front of her with a steaming hot pot, cut meat, vegetables, and fruits on it. Your Majesty! Rinpoche went forward to greet her. What are you holding? I heard that you didn't come out of your room after coming back. Why do you look so tired? The Empress looked at Rinpoche suspiciously. Your Majesty, take a look. Is this book the same as Rui visualization? I just took a look at it and fainted. Rinpoche handed over the 2 books and smiled bitterly. Oh, where did you get it? The Empress asked as she took the books and flipped through them. Rinpoche told the Empress about the origins of the books. The Empress quickly flipped through Rui visualization, then flipped open the animal hide book. She only saw the first page and said, the person who wrote this book is extraordinary. Even though I don't know calligraphy, I have seen some people who integrated their sword intent or saber intent into their words. Compared to this person, they are far inferior. Soon after, the Empress stopped talking and focused on reading the contents of the book. After a while, she put it down and raised her head, saying, You are really lucky that this book fell into your hands just like that. You guessed it right. This book and Rui visualization are one and the same. One is a way to refine the body, and the other is a way to refine the mind. Furthermore, this set of martial arts is much more brilliant than I thought. Since you have practiced Rui visualization before and have attained the earth wheel level, you can try to practice this set of martial arts. When that time comes, you will be able to cross the path to heaven and enter the spirit wheel level without any obstacles. Furthermore, the power of this set of martial arts can only be revealed after attaining the spirit wheel level. It is very brilliant. At this point, a smile appeared on the Empress's face. Now that Rinpoche had obtained this set of martial arts, she wouldn't have to worry about his future cultivation. How brilliant is it? Rinpoche immediately asked in high spirits. The Empress's words made all the worries in his heart vanish without a trace. It's very brilliant. It's as tall as a building. The Empress winked at Rinpoche and actually revealed a mischievous expression. Rinpoche was stunned and said, Your Majesty, there is something on your eyelashes. What? The Empress touched her eyelashes, raised her head and asked, Are you lying to me again? Let me do it. Rinpoche stretched out his fingers and touched her eyes. The Empress's eyelashes trembled slightly and allowed Rinpoche's fingers to touch them. Chapter 648. Sir Tong, is the rubber here? Rinpoche had just heard that more than a dozen ox carts filled with wooden barrels had arrived at the Ministry of Works and rushed over just in time to see Tong Jingye and the ox carts filled with wooden barrels in the courtyard. Sir Ren, you came at the right time. Tong Jingye laughed. Take a look and see if this is what you want. I have something good to show you in a while. Rinpoche rubbed his palms, stepped forward, and opened the lid of a wooden barrel. It was filled with milky white rubber. Unlike the rubber that had been dried the last time, the rubber juice that was extracted this time was directly sealed in a wooden barrel before being transported to Lon City. This is it. Rinpoche smelled it and laughed. After waiting for so long, it was finally here. With this rubber, he could start making a lot of things. Send a cart of this rubber to Black Bamboo Academy and the rest to the Beast Park. Rinpoche made the arrangements before asking Tong Jingye, is the soap ready? I made a batch according to what you said. Since you are here, let's go take a look, Tong Jingye said with a smile. Soap was said to be expensive even in the Yun Nation, let alone in Dayo. Very few people could afford it. However, he didn't expect it to be so easy to make. As long as one knew the production method, they could casually find a few people to make usable soap. Furthermore, according to Rinpoche's instructions, they added crushed flower petals to the soap so that it could be produced in several colors and had the fragrance of flower petals. It looked much better than the soap sold by the people of the Yun Nation. This made Tong Jingye quite proud. Although the soap was made according to Rinpoche's instructions, it was also a credit to the Ministry of Works. One had to know that there were too few things in Dayo. Every time there was something that Dayo didn't have, he would feel excited. Rinpoche followed Tong Jingye out of the city and came to a newly built courtyard in the suburbs. The walls and the houses in the courtyard were all made of red bricks. Someone saw the two of them coming with their guards and immediately welcomed them inside. In a relatively large warehouse, Rinpoche saw the freshly made soap. According to Rinpoche, it was made from scented soap. This type of pancreas was made by grinding the pancreas of jumping sheep into powder, adding plant ash, animal fat, and mixing them into a thick paste. Then, it was mixed with flour powder and pressed into a block. Finally, it was placed on a rack to dry in the shade before being cut into pieces. When Rinpoche arrived at the warehouse, he saw a large piece of pancreas placed to one side. There was a water trough at the bottom of the shelf to guide the dripping liquid into a bucket. This liquid was a byproduct of making soap, glycerin. It was even more valuable than the soap itself. Glycerin can be made into nitroglycerin, diatomic manganese explosives, gelatinous explosives, and even smokeless gunpowder. Of course, he wasn't prepared to use such explosives, which were highly explosive, in a war. There were no secrets in the world that could be kept forever. The birth of explosives and gunpowder was a huge threat to the Aboriginals, who had a small population but were individually powerful. If explosives and gunpowder were developed, the advantage of the Aboriginals would be greatly reduced, and the disadvantage of having a small population would be obvious. Therefore, Rinpoche was prepared to keep this thing firmly in his hands. If explosives and gunpowder weren't a hurdle that couldn't be avoided in the development of science and technology, Rinpoche wouldn't want to manufacture them. Rinpoche walked around the warehouse and picked up a few pieces of soap that had already been cut. There were a total of 3 types of fragrances, and one of them was the Empress's favorite. The production was a little rough, but it was considered good for a start. Rinpoche asked someone to fetch a basin of water and washed his hands with the soap to check the effect. After confirming that there were no problems, he turned around and asked, Sir Tong, how much are you going to sell this soap? Sir Tong, how much are you going to sell this soap? Therefore, this thing has been manufactured, but the Empress still has to decide how to sell it. Rinpoche nodded slightly and threw the few pieces of soap to the guards behind him. Rinpoche nodded slightly and threw the few pieces of soap to the guards behind him. Sir Tong, I will get someone to deal with this glycerin later, Rinpoche said. The production of soap would inevitably produce a large amount of glycerin. Besides using a small amount as a solvent, the rest had to be disposed of elsewhere. He wasn't prepared to hand over such a thing to others. Is this thing still useful? Tong Jingye had wanted to ask about this for a long time. It's a little useful, but it's better not to use it. Rinpoche waved his hand. Subsequently, the two of them went to the other warehouses to take a look. These warehouses were used to dry and grind pancreas, grind flours, and heat fat to make soap. There was also a large open space that was specially used to burn plant ash. Although the place wasn't small, there weren't many people, only a few dozen. You can print some patterns on the soap. Get a carpenter to make a few molds and print the patterns when pressing it. This will make it look more exquisite. Furthermore, the factory can be expanded. There are too few people now, and the production volume is too low. This thing is a consumable, and even if the factory is expanded 10 times, it can still be sold. If it doesn't work, we can find a way to sell it to Great Xia. Sir Ren, do you have a trade route to Great Xia? Tong Jingye asked. I'm in contact. Rinpoche had already contacted Su Qing through Qing Lian. Later, he could also open up another route and send a caravan of the Jing tribe to Great Xia. However, within a year or two, there would definitely be internal strife in Great Xia. At that time, it was hard to say what the situation would be like. During times of chaos, non-essential goods like soap, glass, and silver mirrors would have limited sales. However, after conquering the Yun nation, it would be a good dumping ground. After visiting the soap factory, Rinpoche returned to the palace and handed the few pieces of soap to the Empress. Your Majesty, these are made by the Ministry of Works. So, the Empress picked up a piece of soap and examined it. It was straight and angular, and there were traces of cutting on it. Not bad. I've tried it, and it's similar to what I expected. It's slightly better than the soap from the Yun nation. That's good. The Empress smiled. The days when all the goods were brought in by foreign caravans were gradually fading away. After that, Rinpoche talked to the Empress about the production and sales of the soap. What do you think? The first thing the Empress thought of was to ask Rinpoche. Set up a Department of Commerce that will be responsible for managing the factories and establishing sales channels. At the end of the year, a certain proportion will be handed over to the imperial court, and the remaining portion will be used to expand the factories, Rinpoche said casually. Apart from you, I can't think of anyone else who can do it, the Empress said. I don't have the time, but I have an idea. Your Majesty, choose a department chief first and let the two shopkeepers from the caravan, Tang Feng and Gu Ziheng, be your assistants. Tang Feng and Gu Ziheng were both veterans in the caravan and had a certain understanding of this area. As assistants, they were capable enough. Now that there was only one soap factory, they could use it as practice. After they were familiar with it, the rest could be started. In the past, some of the things that the various departments needed were allocated internally. In the future, as long as the goods had characteristics, they could be classified under the Department of Commerce. The Ministry of Revenue would allocate funds to the various departments, and the various departments would then purchase from the Department of Commerce. After deducting the cost, the money would be handed over to the Ministry of Revenue in proportion. This way, everything would be on track, Rinpoche said. This is the business model on Earth, right? However, by doing so, the Department of Commerce would have too much power in the future. The Empress held her chin and pondered. Although the Department of Commerce didn't have much in its hands now, the Empress knew that according to what Rinpoche said, it would definitely become one of the most powerful departments in Dayo after it developed. At that time, it would be a separate department from the 6 departments of Dayo. Therefore, Your Majesty, you have to choose the candidate for the department chief carefully. Ability and loyalty are indispensable, Rinpoche said. Chapter 649. After Rinpoche and the Empress finished talking, the court continued to discuss the issue of the Department of Commerce for the next few days. On one hand, many people felt that the Department of Commerce was completely unnecessary. On the other hand, the Ministry of Works and the Ministry of Revenue both hoped to include the Department of Commerce in their respective areas. For the next few days, there were arguments in the court every day, and it was said that a lot of bricks were cleared from the hall every day. In the end, even Rinpoche went into battle with a loudspeaker and used his volume to reason with the court officials. The empress used force to ensure that these people would listen to Rinpoche's reasoning. After arguing for 5 days, Rinpoche and the empress, who were superior in both volume and force, won. Finally, the matter of the Department of Commerce was settled. The Department of Commerce was directly responsible to the empress, and Rinpoche became the first minister of the Department of Commerce. There was another side effect, which was that the officials in the court had different degrees of tinnitus. The first thing Rinpoche did was to find a courtyard in the city and decide on the location of the Department of Commerce. Before he could even summon Tang Feng and Gu Ziheng over, unexpectedly, someone came to join him. This was indeed beyond his expectations. When he left the academy, he was surprised to see that man outside the door and hear the purpose of his visit. Standing outside the door was a middle-aged man in a long gown. He was thin and weighed about 100 kilograms. When he saw Rinpoche coming out of the academy, he cupped his hands and said, "Minister Ren, I'm Zhu Zhua, and I'm here to recommend myself." "Recommend myself?" Rinpoche repeated before opening his mouth. "May I invite Minister Ren to come in?" Zhu Zhua asked. "Come in and talk." Rinpoche waved his hand and asked him to follow him into the academy. He was curious about what this person could say. After all, it was quite rare for someone to recommend themselves to be his subordinate. Furthermore, this person had come looking for him right after his appointment. He was really well informed. He wondered if this person had anything that caught his eye. Rinpoche sat in a chair with his arms folded and sized him up. He looked like someone from the Yun Nation or Great Xia. He looked like a scholar, unlike the typical aboriginals who were full of wildness. "Speak." "Sir Ren, to tell you the truth, I'm currently serving as the Minister of Agriculture and Livestock. It's really rash of me to recommend myself. However, I have always been fascinated by what Principal Ren has done. I have heard about the iron mine at Mount Damo and other things. Now that I've heard that Sir Ren is establishing the Department of Commerce, I feel that I can be of some use to you. Hence, I'm taking the liberty to recommend myself. I have traveled in the Yun Nation for many years." Zhu Zhua's words moved Rinpoche. He didn't expect it to be a turtle. Since he was able to become a minister-counselor, he must have the ability. He had traveled in the Yun Nation for many years, so he had some knowledge. Subsequently, Rinpoche asked Zhu Zhua a few questions. Even though Zhu Zhua's answers weren't completely satisfactory to Rinpoche, this was because Rinpoche had seen all kinds of business models on Earth and had high standards. In this world, it was impossible to find someone who could completely satisfy him in terms of business. In reality, Zhu Zhua's experience and way of thinking were much better than the average aboriginals. "You go back first. I'll think about it." At this moment, Rinpoche was very tempted. However, he didn't show any expression and simply asked the other party to go back. "Yes, Sir Ren. I shall take my leave then." Zhu Zhua cupped his fists and left without any hesitation. This made Rinpoche think highly of him. After Zhu Zhua left, Rinpoche shook his head and said, "I didn't expect there to be such a person in the Ministry of Works. It's such a waste to leave him in the Department of Agriculture and Livestock." That afternoon, Rinpoche got someone to investigate Zhu Zhua. He then asked the Empress for an appointment to transfer him from the Department of Agriculture and Livestock and promoted him to the Director of the Department of Commerce to be his assistant. Subsequently, Tang Feng and Gu Ziheng, the two former shopkeepers of the caravan, were transferred to the Department of Commerce as minister counselors. The two of them were promoted from shopkeepers of the caravan to secondary class, rank 5 minister counselors. It could be said that they had reached heaven in a single bound, so they were naturally very grateful to Rinpoche. After that, Rinpoche transferred some people from the Ministry of Works and the Ministry of Revenue to be the backbone of the Department of Commerce. He then asked the rearguard commandery to find some experienced businessmen in Tianjin Basin and send them to Lan City. In some ways, these profit-driven businessmen were much more useful than the officials from the Ministry of Works and the Ministry of Revenue. Rinpoche divided the Department of Commerce into 3 parts. They were responsible for factories, trade routes, and financial planning. The 3 parts were completely separated. In this way, when the Department of Commerce was promoted to the Ministry of Commerce, it could be divided into 3 departments. This way, the framework would be set. After that, Rinpoche became a hands-off shopkeeper. He set the direction and threw the rest to others. He was preparing for another matter at the school, which was the hot air balloon. Li Fu's ascension to immortality depended on it. After all, the materials in this world weren't at the level of those on Earth, and there weren't any products like nylon cloth. Rinpoche simply chose to use 2 layers of coarse cloth that were strong enough and brushed a layer of rubber in the middle to increase the density and reduce air permeability. As for the fuel, Rinpoche chose coal and a type of wood that could burn for a long time. Rinpoche estimated that such a hot air balloon should be able to take Li Fu up 10,000 to 15,000 meters. As for the heat control valve, there was none at all. How was Li Fu going to come down after he went up? Rinpoche simply didn't consider this problem. At most, he would prepare another piece of cloth for him and let him jump down while dragging the 4 corners. In any case, with his strength, he shouldn't fall to his death. If he fell to his death, the Empress would naturally become the 3rd most powerful person in the world. Ever since Li Fu saw Rinpoche release the Kong Ming lantern during the New Year, he had been studying how the Kong Ming lantern flew and whether it could take him to the sky. For this matter, he had looked for Rinpoche many times, but Rinpoche had always pushed him away with the excuse of materials. At this moment, when he heard Rinpoche say that he wanted to make a hot air balloon to send him to the sky, Li Fu immediately couldn't hold back. For a full 200 years, he had been searching for a way to ascend to the sky. After he had searched all the places that were rumored to be haunted by deities and ghosts, the hot air balloon had become his greatest hope. Even though Rinpoche had repeatedly told him that the current hot air balloon could only reach a certain height, he was still elated. It was just like how he felt when he saw his fiancée when he was young. In his eyes, it was good to be closer to the sky. Even if he couldn't touch it, he could at least see a glimmer of hope. Perhaps he would be able to see the deities in the sky. This #1 person in the world who kicked people's balls whenever he had nothing better to do, had never left the academy since the materials were sent there. After figuring out how to make this hot air balloon, he became the supervisor. Every day, he would watch as the people brushed a layer of rubber liquid on the cloth and pressed 2 pieces of cloth together to stitch them together. Every day, he would check if there were any problems with the finished cloth. If there were any mistakes, he would fly into a rage. Every day, he would take the blueprint and repeatedly compare it with Rinpoche, asking him about the various obstacles, and Rinpoche was never tired of it. As the area of the stitched cloth grew larger and larger, a ball made of cloth and animal tendons was gradually completed. Li Fu finally calmed down. Half a month later, the hot air balloon was finally completed. Hey, you are going to ascend to the sky the day after tomorrow. Shouldn't you teach me your God's finger? If you fall to your death, you will be brought to the coffin. Rinpoche stood in the courtyard and looked at the hot air balloon with the slogans, "One world, one dream. If the heart is there, the dream is there," and "I want to fly to the sky and stand shoulder to shoulder with the sun," as he patted Li Fu. Chapter 650. On Earth, there were 365 days a year, but in this world, there were only 30 days in a month and 360 days in a year. On February 30th, year 72 of the Dayo calendar, this world's first hot air balloon is about to bring an angry Hulk to conquer the sky, a deep voice said from the sidelines. "Sir, what's a Hulk?" The official who was taking notes looked up with a puzzled expression. "You don't have to know what it is, just write according to what I say." In addition to carrying an angry Hulk, this hot air balloon also carries the thousands of years of mankind's dream of flying into the sky. It also marks the beginning of mankind's exploration of the sky, Rinpoche continued. "What exactly is a Hulk?" the Empress asked from behind Rinpoche. "The Hulk represents power," Rinpoche replied. "It's just a metaphor." The Empress looked at Rinpoche suspiciously. She felt that he was lying again. "Tell me, how much of what you said to me back then was true and how much was false?" the Empress suddenly asked. "With your Majesty's wisdom and intelligence, How can I hide anything from you? Renbachin laughed. The Empress snorted softly and brushed aside this sudden thought. At this moment, everyone was at the plaza in front of the palace. Besides the Empress, there were also the court officials, students from Black Bamboo Academy, and many family members of officials watching from afar. In the middle of the plaza was a hot air balloon that was being prepared. There was no thermal control equipment or any protective equipment. There was only a hot air balloon and a bamboo basket below it. On top of the basket was a large stove. As the coal and firewood in the stove burned, the hot air balloon gradually expanded and began to rise from the ground with the bamboo basket below it. One world, one dream. Tu-Wan read each word as she looked at the words that were completely revealed as the balloon expanded. Immediately, someone ran to the side to see what was written in other directions. If the heart is there, the dream is there. I want to fly to the sky and stand shoulder to shoulder with the sun. These words are very imposing and I like them very much. Qin Chuan laughed. Although they were suppressed by Renbachin and the Empress with both volume and force, these people didn't hold a grudge against them. The Aboriginals were mostly straightforward people. Unless they had really offended someone, like how Renbachin had offended young Sparrow Hawk back then, they wouldn't care about small disputes. Can this thing fly? Qin Chuan moved closer to Renbachin and asked. Of course you can. You'll be able to see it soon. If this thing can fly, then can it bring soldiers into enemy cities? Qin Chuan asked. Then, they were shot down by an arrow and fell to their deaths. Before Renbachin could say anything, Tong Jingye had already said this and looked at Qin Chuan with a mocking expression. Keep quiet. The Empress said coldly. The two of them immediately stopped talking, glared at each other, and stood on either side of each other. Senior, it's almost done. Remember, if you fall, you must spread that piece of cloth as soon as possible to increase resistance and slow down the speed. Renbachin stepped forward and patted Li Fu. In fact, there was no need to use an if, it should be an affirmative. I know. According to what you said, this thing can't go all the way to the sky, but it's good to be closer to the sky. I want to go up and see for myself. Li Fu wasn't as crazy as he was a few days ago and had completely calmed down. Well, the materials aren't up to standard yet, but we can make better ones in the future. Renbachin nodded. However, Renbachin knew that it would be useless even if he made a modern hot air balloon. The rise of a hot air balloon depended entirely on the buoyancy of the air. After reaching a certain height, the air would become thinner, and even the best technology wouldn't be able to make a hot air balloon reach the level of a rocket. That's all right, I'll go up and take a look. Li Fu said as he watched the hot air balloon slowly rise. Use coal first and then molten wood when you reach a certain height. The flame of molten wood is bigger and will allow you to fly higher, Renbachin reminded him again. I know. All right, I'm going up. Li Fu waved his hand and then jumped into the bamboo basket on the hot air balloon. As Li Fu broke the rope on the hot air balloon, it began to slowly rise into the sky. There was an immediate burst of exclamations around the venue. The fact that it could actually fly was an extremely shocking thing for most people. On the other hand, the students from the Black Bamboo Academy were proud because they knew the principles and production methods of this thing. Seeing the shocked expressions of the others made them feel extremely carefree. Many of the Zhang family's craftsmen were also dumbfounded as they watched this scene. They had no idea how this was done. As the hot air balloon flew higher and higher, the entire city could see this huge flying object. Look, something is flying, someone shouted as he pointed to the sky. In just a moment, a group of people stood beside him and looked up at the sky. What's that? It looks so weird. There are words written on it. What are they written? I want to fly to the sky and stand side by side with the sun. Someone with good eyesight identified the words one by one. This thing is going to fly to the sun. Everyone exclaimed after hearing this. Soon, the hot air balloon flew higher and higher under everyone's gaze until it became a smalled. Then, a gust of wind blew past. The hot air balloon was blown away in front of everyone's eyes. Everyone looked at the hot air balloon that quickly disappeared in the sky and looked at Renbachin in unison. Renbachin stroked his chin and said, The sky is like the sea. It's an area that humans rarely set foot in and is full of all kinds of opportunities and dangers. Can he still come back? Rinpoche put his hand on his head to block the sun and looked into the distance. The fuel is only enough to burn for less than 2 hours. It shouldn't fly too far, right? Rinpoche turned to the Empress and said, "Your Majesty, let's go back." After the two of them returned to the palace, everyone else dispersed. Those who needed to go back to handle official business did so, those who needed to go back to make clocks and watches, and those who needed to go back to make locomotives. However, for the children of the officials and commoners, such a huge thing flying into the sky was still something that they could discuss for a long time. No matter which world, people were extremely enthusiastic about the dream of flying in the sky. "I heard that something flew into the sky in front of the palace today?" Qin Lian was asked by Ning Kaichen as soon as she returned to the tavern. Qin Lian nodded. Until now, she still felt that this thing was very powerful and interesting. If she had the chance, she also wanted to ride that thing into the sky to see what it looked like. "What's that? How did you do it?" "It's called a hot air balloon. I saw how it was made, but it's a little troublesome to gather the materials," Qin Lian said. "It would be great if I could also go up to the sky to take a look," Ning Kaichen said with some yearning. "I heard that that thing is going to fly to the sun? The sun is so hot, will it catch fire?" Ning Kaichen asked again. Qin Lian was stunned. She really hadn't considered this question. There were many such discussions in the city. This hot air balloon didn't have much technical content in Rinpoche's eyes, but many people felt that it was very powerful. It was simply too powerful to be able to take people into the sky. The reputation of the Black Bamboo Academy also took this opportunity to spread throughout Lan City. Chapter 651. Shanghai. In a bar at the corner of the street, it was filled with beer bottles, drinks, cooked food, and pizzas. It looked no different from any other bar, except for the tightly shut door. There were more than a dozen people either standing or sitting in the bar. Some of them were Chinese, while others were blonde foreigners. Some were holding a glass of beer, some were playing with a handheld game, and some were playing with a dagger. Their faces were either calm or relaxed. There was no sign that they were having a party. "Everyone, according to the results of our investigation, the thing we want is in that house." One of the men with blonde hair and blue eyes lowered the volume of the speaker and clapped a few times to attract everyone's attention. "Steve, do you see those people in the yard? They can use a car as a gym equipment. They can break a tree with one punch. God, are they really human? I even suspect that a superhero from a movie has come to life." Another person said in an exaggerated tone. The people around him ignored him, because he had said this more than once. "Andy, that's why we're here. The order from above is to get what we want from them no matter what," Steve said. "Yes, strength doesn't mean strength. It also requires skill and flexibility. There's a saying in Hua Nation, speed is the only unbeatable martial art. I like this saying. Guns are the fastest." A bronze-skinned woman stuck the dagger in her hand on the table and said, "This is not an easy task. Those people are not just strong, you can tell from their movements. And they're not just one person, there are more than a dozen of them. The most important thing is the location. This is not some small country, it's Hua Nation, one of the most dangerous countries in the world. I hate carrying out missions in this country," another bald man said. "This is a mission, everyone, please remember your identity," Steve raised his voice to remind them. "They do look strange, but that's why we're here. According to the information obtained by the CIA, the owner of the house has a laboratory under his name, and on the surface, he's doing drug research. In reality, he's doing some biochemical research on the human body, and there's been considerable results. These things have already been obtained by Hua Nation, and they're making biochemical soldiers. It was obvious that there was no way we could steal those things from Hua, and this person was the best way to do so. Our mission is to get the information he has, and if possible, take the owner of the room with us." Steve took out various photos and blueprints from a folder and threw them on the table. The photo at the top was of a sturdy man in his 20s. The second photo was of a woman in red with a cold expression. This man is our target. Let's call him Mole. This woman, whose identity was unknown, was his girlfriend. They have been in the room for a long time. I believe that there is a basement in the house. The thing we want and our target are most likely in the basement. This is the blueprint of the room. The location of the basement is likely to be here and here. Also, note that the food they transport every day is enough to feed 200 people. Therefore, we have reason to believe that there is another laboratory underground, and there are many people or experimental materials inside. Stephen tapped twice on the map. Do you have any other questions? Stephen looked at everyone and answered a few more questions. Seeing that no one had any questions, he said, now let me make the arrangements. This is point 1. There will be surveillance during the day, and they are likely to be Hua Nation's agents. They will leave after 10 at night. However, we still have to keep an eye on this place. If they are discovered, Kobe and Robin will be responsible for dealing with them. This is point 2, the target's entrance. There are no surveillance devices in the entire courtyard, and no dogs, so we can sneak in directly. This and this are point 3 and 4, respectively. Team 1 and Team 2 will sneak in from these 2 points. According to our observations, most of them will drink after 8 at night and end at 10 at night. Their vigilance is very low. Our attack time is at 12 at night, just after the Hua Nation agents change shifts. Let's get rid of those 2 first before attacking. This is their power system. Negan, you are responsible for cutting it off, and Sarah will be responsible for blocking the signal. After cutting off the power, Team 1 will break in from the front, and Team 2 will break in from the back. Team 3 will prevent anyone from escaping. We have to clean up in 5 minutes. We have 1 hour to get all the information and retreat. This is the attack route for each team. Take a look. This mission is very important. Only success is allowed, no failure is allowed. Also, this is the retreat route. Everyone must remember it. After we succeed, a speedboat will pick us up and we will arrive in the open sea in 4 hours. If everything goes well, we can disappear from everyone's sight before they can react, Steve arranged. Everyone picked up a piece of paper from the table. On it were architectural blueprints and their mission. Steve, where are the weapons? Have they been delivered? Yes, they have. This operation's code name is Whack-A-Mole. Boss, they don't look right. They might be about to make a move. Should we make a move? In a restaurant not far away, a man asked through a walkie-talkie. No, there's no need to make a move. We can use this opportunity to see how they deal with firearms. A middle-aged man's voice came from the other end of the walkie-talkie. At night, a dozen fully armed people split up into groups and walked to Shishan. Soon, a voice came from the walkie-talkie, Thunder God, point 1 is empty. Steve heard it and said, check the surroundings. If there's no problem, go straight to point 3. Soon, the group arrived at points 3 and 4 without a hitch. The lights in the villa had already been turned off, and it was pitch black. Steve looked at his watch, and after confirming that it was almost time, he put on the infrared night vision goggles. Everything in the darkness immediately became clear. Thunder God, this is the president. We have succeeded. Negan's voice came from the earpiece. Just in time. Steve looked at the time on his watch and thought to himself. Hopefully, everything went smoothly. After this mission, he could be transferred back to the headquarters. Team 1 has arrived at the main entrance. Team 2 has arrived at the back door. When Team 1 kicked open the door, they smelled the strong smell of alcohol. After rushing in and seeing the people lying on the sofa and the floor, they did not hesitate at all and immediately raised their rifles. However, the moment the flames shot out, the huge men who were lying on the floor jumped up with agility that did not match their bodies. Enemy attack. War Bear roared. His eyes were like bronze bells, and he crossed the distance of 7 to 8 meters like lightning. His fist whistled through the air as it smashed into a man's head. His head instantly exploded like a smashed watermelon. At the same time, he swept his leg across the chest of another person, and that person was instantly plastered to the wall. His entire chest caved in, as if he had been hit by a car. When he finished off 2 people, the other 2 people who had rushed in were also finished off. All of this happened in the blink of an eye. Almost at the moment when the gun was fired, everyone jumped up from the ground. The kill was already completed. The 4 people of Team 1 did not even make a sound before they were smashed into pieces like tofu. At this moment, the 4 people of Team 2 had just rushed in from the back window, and they were greeted by more than 10 man-bears who were drunk but full of killing intent. Team 1, what's the situation? Team 1? Team 1, report back. Team 2? Team 2? What exactly happened? Steve was still calling out to the 2 teams outside. Just now, he only heard a few gunshots with silencers and the sound of collisions coming from his earphones, and then everything went silent. At this moment, 5 or 6 men walked out of the door that had been smashed open. They looked up and looked around, then jumped away at an amazing speed. One of them went straight to Steve, while the others went to other places where there were people. Like superheroes in the movies, the 5 or 6 people jumped dozens of meters and almost reached Steve's head in one jump. This scene made Steve's eyes pop out. No, this is impossible. Steve rolled on the ground and at the same time raised his hand to shoot into the air. However, the man just crossed his arms in front of him to protect his vital parts. As blood bloomed on the man's body, a big foot stepped on Steve's chest. Chapter 652. Huh? You were actually injured? Idiot. Xiong-ing was ridiculed when he returned to the villa with a body full of bullet holes and a tattered corpse. I just wanted to see how powerful this thing is. Xiong-ing retorted. Then why didn't you stick your head out for him to hit? Su Wei mocked. Why do you have so much nonsense? Xiong-ing glared at him. Just as Su Wei retorted, he saw a few others dragging corpses back. Xiong-ing wasn't the only one injured. Have you seen this thing before? Xiong-zhan understood the situation and looked at Xiong-ing suspiciously. I've seen it before, but I haven't tried it myself. I have to know what it is like to have an idea. This thing is quite fast, but it's not very powerful. Xiong-ing smacked his lips. Who else wants to try? Su Wei picked up an MP5K and gestured around. Me. Someone immediately jumped up excitedly. Su Wei raised his hand and pressed the trigger. He accurately aimed at the side of the body and shot a row of holes in the television behind him. There are no more bullets. How do I reload this thing? Su Wei lowered his head and fiddled with it for a long time, but he still couldn't figure out how to reload it. The little guy should know, right? Give him a call. The little guy referred to Ding Jie, who was thin and small. Even though he practiced martial arts frequently and ate the meat that Rinpoche brought back from Dayo, his body was only slightly stronger. Let me do it. The other winged cavalry warrior was elated. His favorite thing to do was to make phone calls. What he did the most every day was to call various service hotlines and chat with the receptionists about all sorts of trivial matters. These should have bullets. Someone kicked some guns over. Just now, many people lost their lives without firing a single shot. The difference between an earthwheel expert and an ordinary person was too great, even for a specially trained agent. Moreover, the winged cavalry warriors were much stronger than ordinary earthwheel experts. Su Wei lowered his head, picked up a gun, and fired in a random direction. Immediately, 2 men rushed over to grab the bullets in the air. 2 more holes appeared on the palms of the 2 winged cavalry warriors as the bullets were lodged in their bones. It's even faster than the repeating crossbows of Great Xia's crossbow battalion. Then, there was a series of gunshots in the room. A bunch of people took those strange guns and fiddled with them. Some people even used their eyes to see what was inside the gun barrel. Fortunately, there was no misfire. Otherwise, if they died in such a way, they would be laughed at. By the time they were done, the walls and furniture in the room were filled with bullet holes. When they started to study the stun grenades on the corpses, the people from the Messier 87 department finally arrived. The leader was Yang Sr. 7 or 8 cars stopped in front of the door. When he arrived, he found that the door was open. I am from the Messier 87 department. Your boss knows me, and you should have met me before, Yang Sun shouted from outside the door. In the room, the winged cavalry warriors who were studying the grenades looked at each other. Their eyes were filled with, "Who are we?" The boss doesn't know, but the lady boss is quite familiar with them. Just ask them why they're here, Xionging said as he tossed the grenade up and down. Come in. When they arrived, they saw the corpses piled up together, bullet holes everywhere, and the room full of injured people. They were indifferently fiddling with stun grenades and stun grenades. This scene gave Yang Sun a fright. According to the data obtained, these people shouldn't pose too much of a threat, even if they launched a sneak attack in the middle of the night. After all, the physical state of these humanoid monsters was too terrifying. However, when they arrived, they discovered that 11 of the 16 people in the room were actually injured. What was strange was that other than 2 people who were injured in the arms, the rest were injured in the hands. This made them wonder how they did it. Where's your boss? Yang Sun asked. He's not here. I knew that someone was going to attack you, so I rushed over, but I was still a step too late. Fortunately, nothing serious happened. Do you need a doctor to come over for your injuries? Injuries? What kind of injury? Everyone looked at him with bright eyes. How could there be any injury? Your arm is still bleeding. Do you want to bandage it? Yang Sun pointed at Xionging and asked. Xionging lowered his head to take a look. Then, the muscles on his arm bulged, and a bullet that was missed just now was squeezed out by him. It fell to the ground with a thud, and without any treatment, the bleeding immediately stopped. This scene made Yang Sun and the others' eyes twitch. Yang Sun pointed at the corpses and said, "These people are foreign agents. We have to bring their corpses back and investigate their origins." These are ours. Many of the winged cavalry warriors glared at him. There were actually people in this world who dared to snatch their things? Even if they didn't deliberately release their aura, it still made Yang Sun and the others feel as if there were more than 10 humanoid beasts in front of them. It was as if they would become food for these beasts at any time. Even though it was summer, it still made everyone feel cold from head to toe. These are corpses, Yang Sun explained. They are also ours. Xionging pointed at the corpses, guns, and ammunition on the ground and said, "They are all ours. My father taught me since young that whoever wants to snatch my things, I will kill him. If I want to snatch someone's things, I will kill him first." Although his voice was flat, it was full of ferocity. His eyes, which were like those of a ferocious beast, gave off a bone-chilling glow. The first sentence was fine, but the second sentence was beyond the bounds of earth. However, Yang Sun didn't doubt the authenticity of these words at all. Although he hadn't dealt with them much, from the information he had obtained, these people were like this. They were cruel, violent, and full of savagery. Yang Sun didn't want to have a conflict with this group of fellows. He changed the topic and asked, "When is your boss coming back?" "I don't know. It's such a hot day. If we don't deal with these corpses, they will rot and stink. In that case, let's dig a hole and bury them. Can we take a look here then? We have to know the identity of these people who attacked you and see if we can find any clues. After that, I will get someone to send you some freezers and put the corpses in them," Yang Sun said helplessly. It seemed like it was easier to talk to him. "Alright, send some wine along the way." This time, the winged cavalry warriors agreed happily. "And pighead meat. And pork knuckles and trotters. Send a roasted pig over." Yang Sun's eyes twitched when he heard this. What did this group of people think they were doing? Delivering food? After that, a group of people busily arranged the corpses into 360 poses and took pictures. The corpses looked like the scene of a car accident. All of them had been hit by a huge force, causing their bones and internal organs to shatter. They were all killed in one blow, and some of them were even decapitated. Everyone knew that it was done by those men next to them and that they were like Ultraman, but they were still speechless. More than a dozen armed elite agents were killed in a short period of time in a surprise attack in the middle of the night. It was really terrifying to see them completely wiped out. Soon after, the wine was delivered. The winged cavalry warriors rolled up their sleeves and happily drank while playing with the bees. Little bee. Pow. Boom. This game of playing with the bees made the eyes of all the people from the Messier 87 twitch and their foreheads break out in cold sweat. When Ding Jie arrived, he saw many unidentified people turning over the corpses. More than a dozen men were drinking and playing finger-guessing games, and someone was sent flying and smashing into the wall at any time. Chapter 653. As for whether flying above the sun would catch on fire, this topic mysteriously swept through half of Lan City. Even Feng Ho specifically came over to ask Rinpoche if it would catch on fire. We won't be able to reach the sun. But will it catch on fire if it does? It will catch fire. Why is it on fire? The sun is a big fireball, just like a torch. Why do you think it's on fire? Why don't you try putting your finger in the fire? If you can't light your fingers, they'll burn. The sun is a big ball of fire. What does the sun keep burning? Why is the sun burning? Do you have 100,000 whys? Rinpoche realized that he wouldn't be able to explain it clearly to Feng Ho. You don't know? Feng Ho had a look of disdain on his face. If you don't know, then say it. Rinpoche almost vomited blood. The sun is made up of the simplest elements such as hydrogen and helium, which convert the pressure of the sun's magnetic field into light and heat. What is a kiss? What is helium? What is a magnetic field? What was conversion? Why didn't the sun go out? Did you know that? Do you know or not? If you don't know, just say you don't know. I'll ask someone else. Rinpoche was immediately infuriated. Why didn't he realize that Feng Ho had such a cheap mouth in the past? How could he be doubted by this fellow? If he didn't know, who else would know? This was intolerable. Rinpoche spent the whole afternoon explaining to Feng Ho that the sun converted hydrogen and helium into light and heat. The converted light and heat were then converted into pressure in the form of a magnetic field. The hydrogen and helium then converted the pressure into light and heat. In this way, the energy repeatedly changed from one form to another, maintaining the same total energy, which was the conservation of energy. Do you understand? Rinpoche had already drunk 3 big cups of tea. There was a crowd of students outside the classroom listening to Rinpoche's lecture. I don't understand. It's too troublesome. Forget it. If you don't understand, then you don't understand. Feng Ho shook his head and walked away with a calm expression. Rinpoche almost spat out another mouthful of blood. Why did I bother with you all afternoon? I drank 3 cups of tea and chatted with you for the whole afternoon, and you just walked away like that? At that time, Rinpoche felt like he had been F***ed. Soon, the court officials no longer pondered the problem of how to find the sun at night. Less than 2 days later, something else attracted their attention. It was a clock that was 2 meters tall and half a meter wide. A quarter of the top was the dial and the bottom was the pendulum. The case is made entirely of wood, and the outside of the dial and pendulum are inlaid with glass. When this was presented to the royal court, it immediately attracted everyone's attention. Especially after knowing that the function of this thing was to measure time, and that it was much more accurate than a sundial and didn't have as many restrictions as a sundial, this thing that could accurately measure time immediately made everyone fall in love with it. A group of people gathered around to study it. The 12 numbers on it represent 24 hours, right? 2-1 asked as she stroked the glass on the dial. Her eyes were almost glued to the glass. How does this thing walk on its own? Zhuyen was also curious. With this thing, time will be much more accurate in the future. Shi Qing stroked his beard and nodded. The Empress was sitting on the throne, allowing them to study the pendulum clock. She looked very happy. She liked this pendulum clock very much. It was the first pendulum clock in the world, and it was perfect for her collection. In addition, this was also made by Rinpoche. She now enjoyed seeing the surprised expressions of these people after he made all kinds of things. However, at this moment, she heard a cracking sound coming from the crowd. The Empress's happy expression immediately froze. The crowd dispersed with a whoosh, leaving behind the dumbfounded Lien Liang of the War Division and the half-broken pendulum clock. "Drag him away and hang him on the city wall," the Empress said coldly. It's not me." Lien Liang wanted to cry but had no tears. He turned to look at his superior, Qin Chuan, who was looking up at the sky. Then he looked at Shi Qing, who was looking down at his heart. Then he looked at Zhui Yan, who was studying his palm print with his head lowered. "If it's not you, who is it?" The Empress's cold gaze swept across everyone. Everyone looked at Lien Liang in unison, and the meaning in their eyes was very clear. "It's you. Sir Lien, confess." Tai Yan said leisurely. Lien Liang opened his mouth for a long time and was almost angered to death by this group of people. He didn't use any strength at all just now. There were so many people touching him just now. How did it become like this? When Ren Baqian returned to the palace, he saw Lien Liang, who was hanging on the city wall, fluttering in the wind. He stood outside the palace and looked at him for a long time, not knowing who did it. This method of binding was really fascinating. They actually used tortoiseshell to tie Lien Liang up. For some reason, Rinpochian suddenly thought of the Yangcheng Lake hairy crabs when he looked at Lien Liang, who was tied up and hung on the city wall. After thinking about it carefully, he had never seen crabs in Dayo and didn't know if there were any. The ingredients in this world were much better than those on Earth. It seemed like in the future, besides searching for various resources, he would also have to find ingredients. Rinpochian returned to the palace while thinking about it. "Sir Ren." Lien Liang's expression changed a few times as he called out to Rinpochian, who was sizing him up from afar and lowering his head in deep thought. Rinpochian stopped and looked up with a smile. "Official Lien, what's the matter?" Lien Liang pondered for a long time. Should he let Rinpochian put in a good word for him, or should he just stand here? Thinking about it carefully, Her Majesty couldn't hang him up for too long, and there was no need for Rinpochian to plead for him. He still owed Rinpochian one. I want to say that the scenery here is very good." Lien Liang tried his best to raise his head and pretend that the scenery here was unique. His bald head shone under the sunlight. Rinpochian originally thought that Lien Liang would ask him to put in a good word for her to be released. In the end, Rinpochian was stunned when he heard what Lien Liang said. "In that case, I shall not disturb Sir Lien any further." Rinpochian cupped his fists at Lien Liang, who was in the air. I'll look at it for a while more." Lien Liang nodded. Rinpochian wanted to laugh, but he kept a straight face. "Your Majesty, what did Sir Lien do?" Rinpochian asked as he entered the palace. "Here." The Empress sat cross-legged on the couch without a care for her image. In front of her was a laptop that was emitting the sound of a game. Upon hearing Rinpochian's words, he raised his head and raised his chin. It was only then that Rinpochian noticed the broken pendulum clock at the side. It had only been a day, or rather, half a day, and it had already become like this. The Aboriginals were indeed experts at demolishing things. The speed at which they dismantled was really fast. Was it done by Sir Lien? Rinpochian was dumbfounded. "I saw Sir Lien just now, and he said that the scenery up there is very good." Chapter 654. Rinpochian and the Empress didn't return to Earth with 2 people, but 3. In addition to Rinpochian and the Empress, there was also a cold-looking lady in metal armor, Exish. Rinpochian originally thought that if this young lady with poor eyesight was nearsighted, he would just give her a pair of glasses. However, based on his online research, Rinpochian discovered that she had a congenital weakness and slight astigmatism. As such, he had no choice but to bring her back to Earth for a hospital. Etinja was shocked for a moment before calming down from the palace of Dayo to the villa on Earth. She squinted her eyes and observed her surroundings. In fact, she already had all kinds of speculations about the Empress's frequent disappearances and those strange things. Now, she finally knew where the Empress went after her disappearance. "There are people downstairs." Exinja squinted her eyes and said, "There are 16 winged cavalry warriors and there are others." "Can you feel them?" Rinpochian asked curiously. Exinja glanced at Rinpochen, turned her head to the side, and said, "I can feel some of them." The aura of the winged cavalry warriors was very special. In addition to their Kismet heaven strength, they also had a very strong murderous aura and a violent aura. In addition, there were 11 other people. They were very weak and were about the same level as a 4 or 5-year-old child. "Oh, I will get you some clothes to change into later." Rinpoche nodded and didn't care too much. It was very normal for there to be people downstairs. "Go and find some clothes for her," the Empress said lightly and went back to her room to change her clothes. "Why do I need to change?" Exinja asked coldly after the Empress left. "Because you can't meet people with these clothes. Just change when I ask you to. You will understand after you go out and observe for yourself." Rinpoche muttered to himself. Where did he have women's clothes? However, seeing that Exinja was only slightly shorter than him, Rinpoche opened his wardrobe and found a white shirt that he hadn't worn since he bought it. He also found a pair of jeans. "Wear it like this." Rinpoche picked it up and demonstrated to Exinja. Exinja's body was covered with iron armor that was connected by rivets. It went from her abdomen to her shoulders and around her neck. Only her arms and the area above her neck were exposed. Below the waist, there was an iron skirt made of iron leaves. The length of the skirt reached above the knees, and it made a rustling sound when she walked. After seeing Rinpoche demonstrate how to put on her clothes, Exinja's expression didn't change at all as she took off her armor. She raised her hands, twisted her body, and the armor on her upper body fell to the ground. His naked upper body was exposed. His skin was as smooth as jade. Perhaps it was because he hadn't seen the sun for a long time, but his skin was almost white. His plump chest stood erect, bewitching and captivating. In addition to that cold but extremely beautiful face, there were not many men who could control themselves in front of her. Rinpoche glanced at her and sighed in admiration. Her figure was really indescribable. It was usually hidden under the armor and was much better than Lin Xiaola's flat figure. However, he did not expect that she was not wearing anything underneath and did not even try to avoid it. Before Rinpoche could say anything, Exinja took off her battle skirt. Fortunately, she was still wearing a pair of safety pants inside. As Aboriginals mostly wore short skirts and often climbed high and low, safety pants were standard equipment. It wasn't like ancient China, where skirts were directly naked underneath. Rinpoche threw the clothes to Exinja, thought for a while, and threw a t-shirt to her. "Put it on inside." Then he changed his clothes. Since a woman like her didn't even try to avoid it, what was there to be afraid of? After Rinpoche changed, he turned to see that Exinja was buttoning her shirt. The shirt and pants were a little baggy on her, but Exinja didn't mind. To her, beauty and ugliness didn't seem to matter. "Follow me down. Talk less and look more," Rinpoche said. "Understood." Exinja nodded. She was originally a person of few words, and it was even more so in this completely unfamiliar place. "Let your hair down." When Rinpoche walked to Exinja's side, he casually pulled out a hairpin from her hair. Exinja moved her fingers, but she didn't stop him and allowed him to pull out the hairpin. As the hairpin was pulled out, her hair immediately fell down, just like Sadako's. Rinpoche nodded. This didn't look so out of place anymore. When he brought Exinja to the staircase, Rinpoche felt that something was wrong because the staircase handrail was damaged in several places, as if it had been scratched by something. He looked down and saw a lot of bloodstains on the floor. Did something happen? Rinpoche's heart skipped a beat. What could happen to the villa? The nation couldn't do anything, and there were people watching at all times. It was impossible for thieves to sneak in, just like what happened to the Jean family in Shurching. What could have happened? This bunch of idiots weren't satisfied with the Little Bee anymore and developed a new game? Rinpoche quickly walked downstairs, looked into the living room, and was stunned. He saw that the living room was in a mess. The floor was covered in blood, and a row of freezers had appeared in the corner of the room. As for the winged cavalry warriors, they were either lying on the sofa or sleeping on the floor. What happened? Rinpoche quickly walked into the living room and looked around. There were many holes in the walls and furniture. These were bullet holes, and he was very familiar with them. Boss. Ding Jie, who was sleeping in the corner, suddenly stood up and swallowed the word, mother, that he almost blurted out. What happened? Ren Baqin asked with a frown. It seems like someone launched a sneak attack last night. Ding Jie thought for a long time before coming up with the word, sneak attack. Although this was indeed the case, it still made him feel a little weird. In particular, when he saw the guns all over the floor last night, he felt like he was watching a blockbuster movie. However, when he thought about how these mountain kids could use cars as barbells, Ding Jie felt that the movies nowadays were too low class. Sneak attack? Poor they. Ren Baqin turned around and found the guns, grenades, and stun grenades on the floor beside the sofa. His frown deepened. Was this a war? Who could mobilize so many people in the country? It said that they are foreign agents. The corpses are in the freezer. Ding Jie said, Boss, you seem to have been targeted. Some people came last night and said that they are from the Messier 87 department. They are now outside. Following which, Ding Jie looked at Exenye, who had followed Ren Baqin downstairs without saying a word. He marveled at her beauty and marveled at the fact that the lady boss was indeed the lady boss. The woman from before was the boss, but who was this? At the same time, he wondered why the boss came downstairs without knowing anything about what happened last night. However, he swallowed all the words he wanted to say. Ren Baqin frowned and kicked each of the winged cavalry warriors who reeked of alcohol. He then walked over to open the freezer and saw the corpses inside. Each freezer contained 2 corpses. There were a total of 8 freezers, and there were 16 corpses. Nearly half of them were Caucasians. There were also a few blacks, South Americans, and 3 people who looked Chinese. My situation has been leaked. Ren Baqin immediately realized the problem. There were 16 of them, 16 fully armed agents. There was no other explanation other than his own situation being leaked. Lady Boss. General Exyenja? I almost couldn't recognize her without her armor. More than a dozen winged cavalry warriors got up from the ground and were surprised to see Exyenja like this. It would be great if they could snatch her home and make her their wife. Unfortunately, they couldn't beat her. Tell me what happened last night. Ren Baqin said with a frown. Oh, I was sleeping. Suddenly, a few bugs rushed in, and then I killed them. A few small bugs? How did they turn the house into this? Ren Baqin looked around. There were more than a dozen winged cavalry warriors, but they actually turned the house into this? One by one. Did you just stand there and watch them shoot at the house? How is that possible? It was Su Wei. This group of people immediately betrayed Su Wei. However, Su Wei looked proud and said, This bunch of idiots are inexperienced. I showed them a gun. However, this thing is quite fun. Ren Baqin's face twitched. The living room was now in ruins with bullet holes everywhere. The TV, air conditioner, and decorations were all broken. You actually did this. Chapter 655. Oh, Ren Baqin has appeared? And there's an unknown woman beside him? Someone is coming down the mountain? How many people? What's their purpose? I got it. Keep an eye on them. I'll head over now. Yang Sun hung up the phone and hurried downstairs to Shi Mountain. When he was about to reach the foot of Shi Mountain, he glanced to the side and suddenly shouted, Stop the car. The driver quickly stopped the car. Yang Sun rolled down the window and looked outside. He saw 2 bear-like men, who were 1.75 to 1.8 meters tall, swaggering into the main entrance of a hotel. Although he wasn't familiar with these 2 men, he had seen their photos many times. In fact, most of the people on the mountain had this kind of build. Coupled with their bald heads that reflected the sunlight, he could even recognize them just by looking at their backs. What are they doing here? Just as this thought emerged in Yang Sen's mind, he saw the 2 men swagger to the flagpole at the entrance of the hotel. They placed their hands on the flagpole, pressed down, and broke the white steel flagpole that was more than 10 centimeters thick. Originally, their looks and figures were rather frightening. Naturally, they attracted a lot of attention when they entered the hotel. The security guard, who was about to step forward to question them, was so frightened that he stopped in his tracks. Then, the two of them carried a flagpole each and ran away. They didn't go through the main entrance, but carried the flagpoles that were more than 10 meters tall, jumped over the wall, and ran away with the wind. Everyone at the entrance of the hotel was dumbfounded by the shocking scene just now. There was also a group of tourists who had just gotten off the bus, and their eyes widened when they saw this scene. "Oh my God!" Gasps were heard one after another. There were originally 3 flagpoles, but now there was only one left standing there alone. Someone pushed it with a look of disbelief. This thing really wasn't made of straw. Soon after, Yang Sen's phone rang. "I saw what happened. You guys go and settle it. I'll go up the mountain." Yang Sen picked up the phone and said as he watched the 2 people disappear into the distance, "This speed is at least 60 miles per hour. The driver looked at the 2 people in front of him and couldn't help but exclaim at the same time. This wasn't a car, it was a person. 60 kilometers in an hour, 1 kilometer in a minute, and 100 meters in 6 seconds. Even a flying person wouldn't be that fast. Moreover, the 2 of them had maintained the same speed and had run at least 1 kilometer. "Follow him," Yang Sen said. 100 meters in 6 seconds. If it was just a few hundred meters or a few hundred meters, it would still be acceptable, even if it had already broken the world record. But to maintain the same speed for a few kilometers, or even run all the way to the villa, was too scary. This meant that the other party's explosive speed far exceeded this speed, possibly reaching 100 meters in 3 seconds, 2 seconds, or even 1 second. This speed was too terrifying. Was this the strength of the soldiers in the blessed enclave? Even if they were elite soldiers, this level of strength was too terrifying. From the very beginning, Yang Sen knew that the other party was a soldier. After all, he could tell at a glance from the aura of having gone through hundreds of battles. He just didn't know what level the other party was at. He had used the detector to observe these people. The power contained in their bodies was about the level of 30 to 40 elite special forces in the country, and the value was between 1,000 to 1,300. They were almost like miniature Hulks. And at this moment, it seemed that in terms of speed, they didn't have any shortcomings. In a place with complicated terrain, fighting with enemies with such speed was simply a disaster. In a second or two, they could reach you from 100 meters away. Unless you opened up a distance in an open area, the opponent wouldn't be able to react. In places with complicated environments like cities, most of the time, the distance was only a few dozen meters, a dozen meters, or even a few meters. It could be said that before you could react, the other party had already reached you and killed you with a punch. These people didn't even need weapons. Their bodies were extremely powerful weapons. No wonder those 2 people hadn't been caught in the Southern Dynasty. In the end, it was the 2 people who followed them who found them. No wonder those special agents died in such a short time. Then the question was, what was up with the bullet holes on their bodies? He didn't think that those special agents could injure so many people at such a short distance, even if they were fully armed and holding weapons. Yang Sen sat in a car far behind the 2 people. Occasionally, there would be cars passing by, and the drivers were all dumbfounded. These 2 people carrying a white steel flagpole ran faster than a car. When Yang Sen arrived outside the villa, the flagpole inside was already set up. On the ground in the middle of the villa, the 2 people stuck the flagpole into the ground more than 2 meters deep. Yang Sen was also sure that those people could indeed travel long distances at this speed. From the hotel to here, it was at least 5 or 6 kilometers. The 2 people didn't slow down at all and seemed to still have energy to spare. However, he didn't have the time to think about this as he was attracted by the situation in the courtyard. He stood there with more than a dozen people. There was also a big man who was tied up and tied to a rope on the flagpole. Behind them, Qi Zixiao, who was dressed in red, stood there with her arms crossed and a cold look on her face. Around her were the members of the Messier 87 department who stayed here to watch. "Raise the flag," he said as he stood in front of the dozen people. Then, a familiar sound of music rang out. "Arise, slaves who are cold and hungry. Arise, the suffering people of the world. Our blood is boiling and we must fight for the truth. The old world has been utterly defeated. Arise, slaves. Don't say that we have nothing. We want to be the masters of the world. F***CK. The onlookers from the Messier 87 department were shocked when they heard this music. What were they doing? The Internationale? Or was it the Tang Dynasty version? Raise the flag. What are you waiting for? Raise it slowly. There must be a sense of ceremony and solemnity. Renbachien said to the woman who was wearing baggy jeans and a white shirt under the flagpole. Learn from me and salute. More than a dozen people imitated Renbachien, raised their arms, and pointed their palms to their temples. They gloated as they watched the big man, who was tied up and had a wooden ball stuffed in his mouth, rise with the music, float with the wind, flutter in the wind, F***. The people from the Messier 87 department were even more shocked. How could they do this? They wanted to shout, 666. Yang Sen, who was in the distance, almost spat out his saliva. What were they doing? They ran to the hotel at the foot of the mountain to snatch 2 flagpoles and scared the hell out of everyone just to raise a flag. It was to raise a person. The ceremony is over. Renbachien retracted his hand. Only then did the people behind him put their hands down. Many of them felt that it was fun and raised their hands again and again. Mr. Ren, what are you? Yang Sen quickly stepped forward and asked. Chapter 656. Renbachien entered the room, opened a freezer, pointed at the corpses inside, and asked, "What's going on?" Some of these people have been lurking in the country for a long time. Some of them have been in the country since 10 years ago. If not for this incident, I'm afraid they wouldn't have revealed themselves. There are also some people who entered the country under various pretenses. Their identities seem normal on the surface, but that's just on the surface. We already have some clues about their real identities. They should be from the CIA, Yang Sen said. Why are they targeting me? Renbachien continued to ask. Yang Sen pondered for a while and said, your information may have been exposed. The other party should know something related to you, but they don't know much. That's why they carried out this operation, which isn't considered weak, but isn't considered strong either. This is also related to their fear of our country. If there are more people, they will definitely be exposed. Of course, if they know everything, they will achieve their goal no matter what price they have to pay. Therefore, I guess they only know that it's related to you and aren't very clear about the specifics. In other words, there's a traitor among your people? We are currently looking for the reason for the leak. I suggest you strengthen the defenses here, such as surveillance equipment. I don't see any of that here, but I can arrange it if you need it. In addition, we will pay more attention to this place in the future. Yang Sen didn't mention anything about putting their people in charge of security. Although he wanted to, he knew that the other party didn't need it. With these burly men here, even if they attacked with the military, they might not be able to take down this place. Especially after being bullied by these people. They couldn't mobilize the military either. This was China, not the United States. Will they have any ideas about my family? Renbachien asked. I will strengthen the protection of your family, Yang Sen said. Thank you. Renbachien cupped his fists to express his gratitude. In fact, this matter didn't make him too worried. He knew better than anyone else the lethality of these winged cavalry warriors. What these winged cavalry warriors lacked was their understanding of firearms. As long as they were familiar with them, no one would be their match in a complicated environment like Shishan. If 16 wasn't enough, 32 would be enough. At most, he would bring some experts back. As long as the other party didn't use large-scale weapons of mass destruction, they wouldn't be a threat. Renbachien invited Yang Sen to sit down and chat for a while before sending him off along with the freezers that were filled with corpses. As for who had leaked the news, he did not care. The country was more concerned about this than he was. Renbachien and the Empress sat on the sofa and were somewhat speechless. Every time they came back, they would first watch the news. In the end, they didn't even have to watch the television this time. Let that idiot hang on the flagpole for 3 days to refresh his memory. Shen Feng will come over in a while. Then she'll see what she needs to buy. She'll probably only be able to return to her original appearance by nightfall. Go out for a walk? It's perfect for Xinji's glasses. All right. The Empress nodded. Xinji, on the other hand, had a calm look on her face. It was as if what the two of them were talking about had nothing to do with her. She didn't even know what glasses were. The Empress sat in the front passenger seat while Xinji sat in the back. The moment the car started moving, Xinji's expression, which had always been like an ancient well, finally changed. This thing is actually alive? That's right. Rinpochen let go of the steering wheel. And it's a female. Then are we in the stomach? Xinji was in a daze. Rinpochen pressed the horn. It was as if this steel monster was responding to Xinji's question with a roar. Why aren't you controlling the direction? The Empress was slightly puzzled as she watched Rinpochen's hands leave the steering wheel, yet the car continued to move forward on its own. I just bought this. It's an intelligent driving system, and I can finally free my hands. Rinpochen smiled as he extended his hand. Xinji's face was like an ancient well, but her eyes followed his hand as it moved, slap. That hand was slapped away by the Empress. Rinpochen took a deep breath. His hand, which hadn't been slapped for a long time, was swollen again. For the rest of the journey, Xinji, who came to Earth for the first time, was very calm. It wasn't until they reached the city that she said, "This looks like a jungle." A steel jungle. Rinpochen nodded. A steel jungle? Hearing these words, Xinji perked up. She squinted her eyes and looked outside, but unfortunately, she couldn't see anything clearly. She could only see that there were many towering pillars in the surroundings. In addition, she saw some of the monsters that she and the others were riding on galloping on both sides. It's even more stable than the mountain-gazing bird, Xinji praised. She then finally thought of an important question and asked, "Where is this place?" Your brain circuit is a little long. I thought you didn't care. This is China, a place very far away from Dayo, Rinpochen ridiculed before explaining. Xinji responded and returned to her previous tranquil state. Xinji's behavior could be said to be the complete opposite of the Empress's when she first came to Earth. When in Rome, do as the Romans do. Follow the rules wherever you go. This was Earth, so they had to follow the laws of Earth. Number 1, do not kill. Secondly, the people here were very fragile, and one couldn't use too much force when hitting them. I'll think of these 2 points first, and I'll let you know when I think of the rest. Almost every time he brought someone back, he would explain everything to her first. On Earth, the Aboriginals' worldview was a little skewed. Things that the Aboriginals thought were normal were all illegal and criminal here. After which, Rinpochen bought a set of clothes for Xinji and brought her to get a pair of glasses. 2 hours later, beside Rinpochen was an intellectual beauty with fluttering long hair. She wore a short skirt, a shirt, and a pair of glasses. Other than her cold expression, she was almost flawless. After putting on the glasses, everything in Xinji's eyes finally became clear. It was no longer a blur of outlines. She no longer relied on her senses to feel things. Instead, she could really see everything around her. The sudden change in resolution caused Xinji to take off her glasses and look at her surroundings. After repeating this a few times, she finally stopped taking them off and turned to look at her surroundings. What's that? The frost on Xinji's face finally melted. She excitedly pointed to a shop with a pink sign that depicted a woman in lingerie. A lingerie shop. Interested? Rinpochen turned to the Empress and asked, "Zixiao, do you want to buy lingerie?" "Sure," the Empress replied casually. Xinji looked at the Empress in surprise. She didn't expect Rinpochen to call her by her name. She then pointed to another shop and asked, "What about that?" "A clothing shop. Didn't we just go there?" "What's that?" "A house, or rather, a tall building. The building is divided into many rooms. There are actually so many people. The ground is paved with stones? Why don't I see any seams?" Without waiting for Rinpochen to answer, Xinji looked up at the sky. "Where's the sun? I've been wanting to see it for a long time. Why don't I see any birds?" "Don't look first. Go in. Ren Baqian pushed open the door of the lingerie shop. The Empress skillfully picked out more than 10 pieces of lingerie. Ren Baqian said to Exenu, who was curious about everything, "You pick 2 pieces too." "What are you doing?" "Wearing inside." Ren Baqian gestured. "What should I pick then?" Exenja looked at the dazzling lineup of lingerie shops with a blank face. Ren Baqian admired Exenja's dazed and helpless expression. Soon after, he calmly picked out a few pieces of white lingerie and underwear and told the salesperson, "D for the bras and 65 for the waist." "How did you know the size of her lingerie? Have you seen it before?" The Empress appeared beside him and asked suspiciously. "Intuition. My intuition has always been accurate." Ren Baqian's expression didn't change. This kind of question was child's play to him and didn't cause any ripples in his heart. The Empress gritted her teeth and gave him a look that said, "Are you bluffing me?" The salesperson had a weird look on her face. When she saw Ren Baqian picking out lingerie for the bespectacled beauty, she thought that she was his girlfriend. She didn't expect that this was, the circle of the rich was indeed messy. "I haven't seen you before either. Didn't I buy it back then? I've never heard you say that the size was wrong." Ren Baqian beamed with joy. "Sure enough, I'm born with talent. A man needs to have some talent." The Empress's face immediately turned from white to red, all the way to her ears. Bang! Chapter 657. The 3 of them strolled along the street. Ren Baqian and the Empress walked side by side while Exenja silently followed behind. After the short period of excitement after putting on the glasses, Exenja returned to her original silent self. She just kept looking at everything around her. The blue sky, the white clouds, the birds, the people, the cars. Everything was fresh and full of temptation in her eyes. Ren Baqian was alone with 2 exceptional beauties, and the gazes of passers-by made his vanity burst. This kind of mentality didn't exist in Dayo, but it would always appear on Earth. Not returning home after becoming rich was like walking at night in brocade clothes. This was his hometown. Whether it was the knowledge of everything, the 3 outlooks, the way of thinking, or the similar growth experiences of everyone, everything indicated that this was his hometown. As a result, such a situation occurred here. He couldn't wait to let the whole world know that the person beside him was his fiancée. The Empress suddenly stopped in her tracks and stared at a spot. In particular, the alluring aroma coming from that direction made her unable to move. Ren Baqian twitched his nose. He didn't need to look to know what the Empress had taken a fancy to. The cake shop. After a while, when the 3 of them came out of the cake shop, the Empress was carrying a large pile of desserts and throwing them into her mouth as she walked. Exenja was taking small bites of a cake and measuring how much was left with her fingers as she ate. It was as if she was afraid that she would finish it in 2 or 3 bites. However, behind them, the cake shop was very busy. Half of the cake shop was packed and ready to be sent to the villa. An aboriginal could support a restaurant, and the Empress could support a restaurant and 2 dessert shops. "Why can't you make it?" The Empress threw the cake into her mouth with one hand and poked Ren Baqian's arm with the other. She always felt that it was a pity that she could only eat such delicacies on Earth. It would be great if Dayo had them as well. "I can do anything except giving birth." Ren Baqian laughed. It wasn't too difficult to learn how to make cakes, but he hadn't thought about it in the past. However, being the husband of the Empress wasn't a job that an ordinary person could do. He had to understand physics and chemistry, understand industrial and commercial affairs, have the strength of an earthwheel expert, and be able to cook, roast meat, and make pastries. Ren Baqian thought about it and felt that he was really an all-rounder. Why didn't I realize how outstanding I was in the past? At the side, the Empress scanned Ren Baqian's body, looking for a place to attack. After searching for a long time, she simply stuck out her finger and poked Ren Baqian's waist. Immediately, Ren Baqian's entire body felt sore and numb. Like a piece of wood, he fell forward stiffly. In the end, the Empress grabbed him by the neck and carried him away. Exenja was watching the movements of the 2 of them from behind. Her eyeballs followed their movements, then she lowered her head to stare at the Empress's heels and blindly followed behind. The next day, Rinpoche had just finished making breakfast and placed it on the table when he received a call and rushed out excitedly. "Brother, I'm here to seek shelter from you." At the high-speed rail station, Renwanyin threw the package aside and gave Rinpoche a hug. "I happen to be short of manpower. You came at the right time." Rinpoche smiled and patted him on the shoulder. "I've grown taller. You're already a senior. Do you have a girlfriend?" "Yes." Renwanyin smiled in high spirits. "Did you bring it? Let me take a look." Rinpoche laughed heartily. "Coming." Renwanyin took a step back and shouted to the side, "Qin, this is my brother." Rinpoche turned around and saw a pretty lady with long hair. She was about 1.65 meters tall and wore an aqua blue dress. She looked rather gentle and quiet. She smiled shyly at Rinpoche and said, "Hello. This is Zhou Qingyun, my girlfriend." Renwanyin put his arm around her shoulder and showed off. "Well, get in the car first." Rinpoche called out to the two of them. "Is this an AI?" Renwanyin got into the car and looked at the dashboard with excitement. "Like it? Take it. I rarely use it anyway." Rinpoche smiled casually. "Forget it. I'm a student, and I'm not suitable to drive such a good car." Renwanyin shook his head. "Don't treat yourself as a student in the future. You have to act like you're doing things here. Furthermore, the people you'll interact with in the future will be different from those you interacted with when you were a student. You still have to have some similar outfits. I don't need to care about these things, but you should. After all, clothes make the man." Rinpoche said. "Got it. I'll learn well." Renwanyin nodded. "I'm not asking you to learn. I'm asking you to do it now. However, someone will help you." While Rinpoche and Renwanyin were talking, Zhou Qingyun looked at Rinpoche curiously from the back seat. She knew that her boyfriend's family conditions weren't bad, but they weren't considered wealthy. Renwanyin never said much, and she didn't ask in detail. She had always felt that his family was at most wealthy, similar to her own family. However, judging from the tone of this brother, he didn't seem like an ordinary person. Just saying that he didn't need to care about his appearance wasn't something that an ordinary person could do. At the very least, it had to be someone of considerable status to say such words. The car drove all the way back to the villa. Rinpoche and Renwanyin chatted along the way, and Zhou Qingyun, who was in the back, also understood some things. It seemed that her boyfriend's brother wanted to start a martial arts company. Although she didn't know much about this, she knew that taekwondo, sanda, and karate were much more popular than martial arts nowadays. She didn't know if there was a future in this industry. However, no matter what, it was a good internship opportunity for a fourth-year student. However, when she entered the villa and looked out of the window, she was a little stunned. There were 2 flagpoles in the courtyard, and a tightly tied man was hanging from the flagpoles. What was going on? There were also huge men in the courtyard exercising with huge barbells. Each of them was like a fierce star, exuding a fierce aura from head to toe. She felt as if she had come to a terrible place. Although Renwanyin's brother looked very valiant, she didn't think much about it before. However, with these fierce faces and people exuding an unapproachable aura from head to toe, she couldn't help but think more. She felt that she was a little lamb stepping into a wolf's den. Renwanyin's brother. Could he be a gangster? Didn't they say that there were no gangsters in China? Or was he involved in some illegal business like loan sharks? Were these people all thugs? "Brother, this is?" Renwanyin saw the man hanging on the flagpole earlier than her and couldn't help but ask. "Just a small lesson. Some people won't learn their lesson if they don't do it." Rinpoche's plain words made Zhou Qingyun quiver. Was this the legendary lynching? Renwanyin's brother didn't look like a good person. No matter how you looked at him, he looked like a violent person. No, she had to persuade him at night. She couldn't let him follow in his brother's footsteps. "Identify the house first. I'm afraid you will come here often in the future. I will get someone to send you to the hotel tonight," Rinpoche said. But Renwanyin nodded. In any case, he would listen to whatever his brother said and definitely wouldn't cheat him. Rinpoche got out of the car and shouted at the winged cavalry warrior, "Let him down." Although he wanted to hang him until he left, his younger brother and his younger brother's girlfriend were still around. It wasn't good to hang him up there, so Rinpoche decided to spare him. One of the winged cavalry warriors walked over and broke the rope. Su Wei, who was hanging on the flagpole, suddenly fell in a free fall. With a weight of more than 150 kilograms and a height of about 10 meters, the entire ground shook when he fell. Chapter 658. Falling from a height of 10 meters and being tied up tightly, a free fall with his body and face on the ground would have severely injured an ordinary person even if he didn't die. However, for a winged cavalry warrior, it was no different from falling while walking. The next second, Su Wei jumped up from the ground. The moment he jumped, the ropes that were tightly tied around his body broke and fell to the ground. He could break these ropes at any time if he wanted to. However, after breaking them, he reckoned that he would really be hung up to dry. Su Wei took out the wooden ball from his mouth and spat a few times. Then, he looked at Rinpoche with a hidden bitterness and said, "Lady boss, I'm hungry." For a day and a night, he listened to others eating meat and drinking wine while he was exposed to the cold wind and basked in the sun. This feeling was really sour. "Get lost, go find your own food," Rinpoche scolded jokingly. Su Wei received the order and teleported to the front of the villa like a rabbit. He opened the door and rushed over. 3 seconds later, he smashed through the glass and flew out with a big shoe print on his face. "Call for takeout yourself." Rinpoche threw the phone to Su Wei, turned around, and said to Ren Wanyan and Zhou Qingyun, "Let's go." Zhou Qingyun's eyes were wide open when the winged cavalry warrior jumped up from the ground. When he teleported to the door, she couldn't even close her mouth. In the end, he smashed through the window and flew out with a big shoe print on his face. These scenes made Zhou Qingyun's brain tremble. What exactly was going on? Ren Wanyan pushed her a few times before she came back to her senses. "Let's go. Why are you in a daze?" Okay. Zhou Qingyun felt that she must have been distracted just now, so she didn't see how that person appeared at the door in an instant. As for other things, such as how he fell from a height of 10 meters without any injuries and how the rope broke, she didn't want to think about them. She followed Ren Wanyan into the house with a blank face. "Sister-in-law." Ren Wanyan's eyes lit up as soon as he entered the room. The Empress shifted her gaze from the television and nodded slightly as a greeting. Although it was a little cold, Ren Wanyan was used to the Empress's coldness during the New Year, so he didn't mind. However, when he saw the Empress, he was more or less a little reserved. Very few people could behave freely in front of the Empress, let alone him. Zhou Qingyun's heart skipped a beat when she saw the woman in red sitting on the sofa. There was actually such a beautiful woman, especially her temperament. She gave off the feeling of the snowy peaks of Kunlun. She was both proud and otherworldly. Was this his sister-in-law? There was also the white-clothed woman standing behind them. Although her appearance and temperament couldn't compare to the red-clothed woman, she was still much better than those celebrities on TV. He didn't know who she was. "Sit." Rinpoche pointed to the sofa. "In a while, I will introduce you to a few people. In the future, you can look for them if you need anything." Rinpoche sat beside the Empress, grabbed her popcorn, and threw it into his mouth. "All right." Ren Wanyan replied obediently. He then looked at Exinja and asked, "This is?" "She's a colleague, you don't have to worry about her." Rinpoche waved his hand. "Brother, this is? This can't be real, right?" Ren Wanyan suddenly noticed that there was a pile of firearms behind the sofa. There were pistols, submachine guns, and even grenades. He was immediately shocked. "It's fake," Rinpoche replied casually. However, neither of them believed him. There were still bullets in the magazines scattered on the floor. Even a fool wouldn't think that they were fake. Zhou Qingyun's brain started to tremble again. She was already convinced that she had fallen into a wolf's den. This place was more dangerous than a wolf's den. Would she be silenced after seeing these things? At the thought of this, her face turned pale, and she didn't even dare to breathe heavily. She was afraid that others would notice this place. Rinpoche noticed that her face had turned pale. He immediately knew what was going on. These things could easily scare ordinary people. Don't think too much. You may not know that I'm a member of a state agency, but I won't reveal the specific department. It's just like how you wouldn't find it strange when you see those policemen with guns. Rinpoche smiled kindly. Zhou Qingyun finally relaxed a little and forced a smile. However, when she saw the bullet holes everywhere on the surrounding walls and the bloodstains that hadn't been wiped clean, she began to feel like she was sitting on pins and needles again. Other people's emotions were at most like riding a roller coaster, going up and down. Her mood was like the stock market, going down again and again as if there was no end to it. After that, Rinpoche called in the winged cavalry warriors who were outside. More than a dozen burly men stood there, almost all of them bare-chested with scars, giving Ren Wanyan and Zhou Qingyun a lot of pressure. Rinpoche first told Ren Wanyan the names of these people. Ren Wanyan had seen a few of them before, but he didn't expect there to be so many of them in Rinpoche's villa. Rinpoche then said with a fierce face, "This is my younger brother. In the future, if anyone asks him to drink with me, I will kill him." "Understood, Lady Boss." The group of burly men laughed heartily and loudly replied, "Get lost." Rinpoche laughed and scolded them. In any case, he probably couldn't get rid of the title of Lady Boss. However, he would get used to it after a while. Just treat it as a nickname. While Rinpoche was cooking, Ren Wanyan walked around the villa. Everything else was fine and within the normal range. However, when they saw the supermarket, they were a little surprised. There were many rich people who bought villas, but this was probably the only one who opened a supermarket in their own home. Zhou Qingyun could only tell herself that this was another strange hobby of rich people. At noon, they witnessed the terrifying appetites of Rinpoche, the Empress, and Exi. In the afternoon, Shenfeng, Ding Jie, and the two hired warriors arrived one after another. The two warriors were surnamed Lu. The eldest brother was Lu Qingwen, and the second brother was Lu Qinggu. Their ancestral home was the hometown of martial arts. They were somewhat famous in the martial arts world, but they weren't very glamorous. Rinpoche saw that the two of them were somewhat useful. After training the winged cavalry warriors, he hired them as nominal consultants. Although the two of them had been scared to death by the winged cavalry during their time in the villa, they were considered to have found a powerful backer. In the future, they wouldn't have to worry about food and clothing, and they could even learn a thing or two from the winged cavalry warriors. Naturally, they were very happy about this. Rinpoche introduced these people to Ren Wanyan one by one as a greeting and arranged the following matters. The only interlude was that Ren Wanyan mistook Shenfeng for a man and even called her brother Shen. This made Shenfeng a little unhappy. Although she always dressed in a gender-neutral manner, she didn't really like being mistaken for a man. Especially after being slapped to the wall by the winged cavalry, she finally realized that being a woman had its benefits. "Boss, aren't you going to dispose of these guns? There's no point in keeping them here, and they might get into trouble," Shenfeng asked before leaving. "Just find a room and throw them inside. Will anyone come to investigate?" Rinpoche looked indifferent. Not to mention that he was currently on a honeymoon with the nation. Even if he were to fall out with them one day, it wouldn't be because of this. The munitions given to him by the Messier 87 department were enough to blow up a small city. Also, let them see if there are any broken skulls and the like. If the housekeepers saw it, it would be easy to scare them. "You guys are too cruel. I heard that the heads of the dead are like the scene of a car accident." Shenfeng bent over and used her fingers to pick out a fingernail-sized piece of broken bone with blood, flesh, and hair from the crack of the cabinet at the door. She looked disgusted. Ren Wanyan and Zhou Qingyun's faces stiffened on the spot, and the sweat on their foreheads dripped down layer by layer. "Boss, I'm leaving first." Shenfeng threw the piece of skull on the shoe cabinet at the side and went out with a smile on her face. Scaring the two of them was considered a small revenge, and she felt much better. However, while Shenfeng was happy, Ren Wanyan and Zhou Qingyun weren't happy at all. If they were in another place, they definitely wouldn't believe it. However, with the guns on the ground, bullet holes, and bloodstains all over the wall, they couldn't tell themselves that it was fake even if they wanted to. Brother! Ren Wanyan broke out in a cold sweat. She was just teasing you too. It's a cow bone. Ren Baqian's expression didn't change at all, completely ignoring the fact that there was still some golden hair on that piece of bone. Regardless of whether the two of them believed it or not, he believed it anyway. For the next 2 days, Ren Baqian was busy with the affairs of the martial arts center and didn't know that Ren Wanyan had an argument with his girlfriend after arriving at the hotel that day. As for the reason, it was because of Ren Wanyan's work here. Even though Ren Baqian said that he was a member of the government, looking at those thuggish men, looking at the room full of weapons, and looking at the piece of skull with hair on it, Zhou Qingyun felt deeply uneasy. You're tuning in to the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.